meeting of the caucus, and once again, we usually meet on the fourth Monday of every month for caucus meetings. I will tell you that I know we're on recess, but we wanted to have a special caucus meeting today to go over a couple of critical issues. First and foremost, I do want to announce that Director Adunama could not be here today. He is dealing with a illness, so he could not be here today. So in his place we have Mr. Gentile. And today's purpose in today's caucus meeting is to accomplish two major things. The two major things we want to accomplish is we're getting a proposal from the finance director and his team regarding planning for future obligations and contingency plans. So they're going to do a presentation. They have asked if this could be considered for introduction and passage on the July the 13th meeting, and I've asked for them to come to this setting to explain what they're asking to do for this council and for the city before the actual meeting on July 13th. So I wanted to come here first so that we can talk about it here first. There's two things that they want to do to accompany pieces of legislation. One is to beef up and put more money into contingency plans, and then one is to have a 27th week in order to be able to prepare appropriately for the actual any kind of contingency plans or any kind of downfalls. The second part of the meeting, I will be talking about recommendations. Once again, this is recommendations for ARPA dollars out of the first tranche. I do want to make sure that I caution everybody that this is a recommendation. This is not a final document, but this is a recommendation. And then after we pass this recommendation, or after we support this recommendation, then we will, in addition, take it to the administration, and we do have a couple of their members here as well, with Chief Davey and his team, that we will then take it and work with the mayor's department and his 10 priorities, and make sure that we make it align between councils and the mayors, so that we can make sure that we make it align between the council's priorities and the mayor's priorities, so that we can reconcile priorities and make sure that we do what we can for the city. So those are the two things that we're trying to do. Once again, we do have food. Please help yourself so that you can get into this presentation. Yep. Okay, and I do want Councilman McCormick, he is going to also bring up another component that he and I have talked about with Councilman McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is not for discussion today. We just wanted to announce to members that we started the process of engaging with our research staff, as well as very preliminarily with the mayor's office on specific actions the city of Cleveland can take to protect abortion access and abortion and reproductive freedom in the city of Cleveland, looking at any and all actions that we can take, what that looks like. So that work is not done, that work is beginning, but wanted to announce that to members. If you are interested in being part of that work, let us know. We can plug in. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilman, and many people may not know this, but I have the only women's health clinic in the city of Cleveland in Ward 6, so this is something that I do think is critical, and some cities are moving towards having sanctuary cities when it comes to women's health issues like this. So I thank Councilman McCormick and Councilwoman Santana. We've had a brief conversation about this, so that is something we are going to discuss at a later date. That being said, Director, you have the floor, and once again, I'm going to ask everyone, could you let him get through his entire presentation? You do have it in print form as well. Make notes, so then you can ask questions, and then we'll get into conversations after that. Director, you have the floor.
Thank you, Council President, and to the chair and to the committee. I'm going to go over the presentation here, and we'll have our asks, what we're asking for towards the, as part of the presentation. So we'll get to exactly what we're talking about. But I want to start off with where we are now. And what we have on here is we have 2020, 2021, and our projected 2022. And what we want to demonstrate here is And out of the revenue, we backed out of one-time revenue. So we backed out the CARES money, we backed out the ARPA money to show our regular revenue stream and what they would have been without one-time revenue, primarily federal funds. Workers' comp rebate was backed out. So when you look at the last 3 years, including the ones that we're in, you see a structural imbalance between expenditures that they keep escalating and the revenue with the impact of COVID, 2020, slowly but surely getting back up, and it's just not keeping pace with the rate of expenditures. So it's important that we have proper reserves and enough reserves on hand, especially if we have another economic downturn. Right now, the economy's in flux, gas prices are high, inflation's high, we could be heading for a recession. A lot of people think we are, but we're not sure. But it's out there and it's possible. Right now, we do have 160 million in uncovered cash, approximately, in the general fund today. Income tax is by far our largest revenue source in the general fund. And during the economic downturn, we had a big decrease in income tax. Again, it's recovering slowly but surely, but it's still not back to the peak in 2019. So little by little, we're gaining on this and trying to get back to levels pre-pandemic in 2019. It's important to know that we're still monitoring the impact of the refunds that people are allowed to file for based on work from home. So we have some impact this year on that. We're monitoring it. So right now, income tax is coming in pretty good, better than kind of anticipated, a little bit better than anticipated. But we're still waiting to see more people file for refunds as the year progresses. Next slide, this is just a graph for income tax. The big spike, 2017, 2018, is when the income tax increased from 2% to 2.5%. As you can see, we were trending up. In 19, we hit our peak, just under the $450 million mark. COVID came 2020, again 2021, and 2022, we're trending back towards where we were in 19. We're still now new wrinkle, work from home and potential refunds. Well, that's another risk that we have to factor in and ensure that we have enough funds on hand to continue the level of service for the citizen and enhance services in some cases. The next slide is we took a look back to the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and then the COVID area. And one thing certain is the economy runs in cycles. This demonstrates 3 cycles that's happened over the past 20 years. And as you see, when the economy takes a downturn, the income taxes drop off rapidly, and it takes a longer time for them to go back up. So the slope going up is a lot. It takes a lot longer to get back to where you were, but the drop off is pretty dramatic. 2008, it took us from 2008 to 2012 to recover to where we were when we had the Great Recession in 2008, when the real estate market kind of went down with a lot of other. At the bottom, the most recent impact, the income tax, is the COVID impact. We talked about that. In 2019, we were at our highest historically in income tax. Took a huge dip, and now we're starting to recover back to pre-pandemic levels. One of the proposals is to add $20 million to the rainy day reserve fund. Cities allowed to have 10% of last year's general fund revenue in the rainy day reserve fund. Right now, we're around 45 million currently. This would raise it to 65 million, which would put us at the cap, which is 10% of what's allowed to be in the rainy day reserve fund. This is to be used for economic downturn, one-time expenses, to be used for legal settlements. Of course, the rainy day reserve fund is an annually appropriated fund, so before any of the rainy day reserve funds are spent, an ordinance is brought back to council, so that has to be appropriated if it's going to be spent. So the current and even the future increases, so that would come back to council if the city did have to spend. So one of the asks is to transfer 20 million out of the general fund balance, current balance, to the rainy day reserve fund, and that would then kind of tap out the level we can fund the rainy day reserve fund, which is the 10%. Now, the new reserve fund that we're trying to establish is the 27 paying and compensated absences reserve fund. So compensated absences is unpaid sick and vacation leave on the city's books. So as everybody accumulates vacation leave and they accumulate sick leave, when they retire, they get paid 1/3 of their sick time and they get paid of all their accrued vacation time. Some of those could be substantial at times if people are not taking a lot of time off. So under Ohio Revised Code 5705.13b, it allows the city to create a reserve for this purpose. Right now, our unpaid vacation and sick leave balance for the general fund is around $70 million, and then it's around that. It's around $70 million, and the 27 pay costs around $13 million. One extra pay. 27 pay will come in the year 2025. So normally we'd have 26 pays to pay all the city workers, but every 11 or so years, depending on what day you get paid, there's an extra pay that you have to pay, and then you have to post in that year. So the city's 27 pay, which equates for the general fund around $13 million, will be in 2025. So it's coming up. This would put aside money to fund the 27 pays, and this would be scrambling if we didn't have a fund that happened. So this would be a new reserve in the city's books. It would operate similar to the rainy day reserve fund. So this will be an annually appropriated fund. Once the money gets in, the only way it can be spent is to come back to council and get an appropriation measure to spend the funds in this fund. So it will be very similar to the rainy day reserve fund, just for a different purpose, which is compensated absences and the fund of 27 pay, which is coming up in 2025. Okay, the next screen, this is our calculation. So I use the 2021 balances for accrued sick, vacation, and people with comp time, which is a small amount. In the general fund only, this does not include any utility expenses. This is all general fund employees. It came to $75,500,000. The approximate cost of an additional pay, I think this says 2024, I believe it's 2025. So I apologize, this is 2024, but I think that's 2025. Because it's tricky, because it depends on what's needing to get paid, so we're trying to nail this down at the beginning of the presentation once put together. That's $12,500,000, so that's how we're arriving at the $90 million that we're requesting as a transfer from the general fund to this newly established reserve. So this legislation will establish the reserve and establish the transfer. Benefits of the approach, this gives the city added fiscal security ongoing, which we're looking to make sure ongoing we have the funds to provide proper level of service, kind of reserve some money to make sure if we have a huge economic downturn that we can continue to function, continue to provide proper service. Right now we're dealing with, as everybody knows, massive inflation, possible recessionary, items coming forward, so That's two things. We're also on the revenue side. I mentioned the income tax, the risk, our major source has some risk involved with it still. So having some additional funds to safeguard the city's financial future ongoing, we think is prudent. The second piece of this is we're hoping this leads to an upgrade, and we're going out to the bond market very soon. We have rating agencies coming up next week. Hopefully by having extra reserves on hand, especially in times of uncertainty, this may lead to a bond upgrade. So if we can get a bond upgrade, that will lower what we have to pay for bond interest. So we're hoping that this will at least lead one of our two rating agencies to boost us, if not both of them. This also helps ensure current cash balances, which exist right now, basically based on one-time federal funds. We have to, eventually that all goes away. We have to have enough funds on our own to continue to function. Timing considerations, as I just mentioned, we're asking that this be introduced and passed on the July 13th council meeting. We're meeting with the bond rating agencies on July 7th, Standards and Poor's and Moody's. We're hoping to get rating upgrades based upon this additional level of reserve that the city is asking for. Deal with bond rating agencies. If you have bigger reserves, they're going to be more comfortable with your ability to repay. And then we expect to sell the general obligation bonds in late July or early August. So we'll be going for a rating mid-July. We'll price them and we'll hit the market either late July or early August to get our funds in and then start off the capital items that were presented a couple of weeks ago. I think that's it. And entertain some questions.
All right, so thank you so much, Director. And I got a couple of questions already. Folks are ready to go, but just a couple of things. Will this affect service delivery? And will putting this money away, in essence, take away money that we would be needed or we would be spending on service delivery?
To the chair, we will still have, if we do these two transfers, we'll still have over $60 million projected above and beyond what's budgeted right now. What we're looking to establish is between the general fund balance that we keep in there, which will be around 60-some million of unencumbered balance, the 90 million reserve and the additional amount of the rainy day, which brings it to 65. This would put in our reserves and our general fund unencumbered balance around 4 months of operating expenses for the general fund, which is kind of a pretty good place to be at. I mean, I'd like to have about 6 months in there, but I don't know if that's going to be realistic. But to get the 4 months of city operations, having it funded in case we have a major downturn, I think in the long term this actually protects city services, because if we do have a recession or another bond falls out, like some of the slides showed on income tax, we'll have something to offset that, to at least continue the level of service going forward. If we don't have a good reserve, then obviously if we get a big downturn, then we run into situations like 2008 where we either had to, take, employees took concessions and the safety forces, took the layoff, so then we had to reduce services in some of those areas if that happened. I think in the long run, the safeguards the ability to provide service, and it shouldn't impact the current level of service. This won't impact the current budget. We still have another 60 million after this transfer that's available when needed for services out of the general fund.
So that was sort of the next question. This would help us avoid those 4-day weeks that the staff had to take back in 2000, late 2000.
They took, to the chair, they took like a 5% decrease in pay, but then they had to take off for 10 days.
Right.
Part of it. And, no, this helps avoid that. Again, no one knows for sure where the economy is going, but like I said, when you drive into the gas station or go to the grocery store, you realize this is not good. That's the way people have to pay for gas, and people are paying for everything. So, this could get worse. Funds could dry up, and this will help us sustain basically not knowing what's about to happen or what's
So, and I want to ask this question, next question the right way, but this isn't, because this ARPA money, one-time money was put into the general fund in order to have a gap. We put $110 million in last year. Is any of this money part of that budget? And is it legal for us to do that? That's part one of the question. And number two, if you could let us know, this doesn't impede our flexibility to make sure that this council will make decisions about ARPA dollars. This is not like we're kicking all of the responsibility to the administration, and then us in the second tranche or the first tranche won't have the flexibility to have input on decisions on how ARPA dollars are spent.
Yeah, to the chair, the $109 million we spent last year, we offset that with public safety expenses. So we've met all federal regulations, so it's general fund money. So it's legal to be transferred to this new fund. So we've met all federal regulations on the revenue. Because one of the allowable expenses was public safety. So we basically offset the public safety expenses to plug it in.
So you use that one-time $109 million to kind of help offset some of the public safety expenses that we would have deficit had it not been for those dollars.
Right, and then we ended, right now, it is part of the 160, because we have 160 million right now in the general fund, so it's part of our operations, part of the companies. Once it gets in there, it's kind of, but it is general fund money. It's no longer federal money. We met all federal guidelines. The auditors are currently doing the audit right now. They're hopefully wrapping up here in the next couple of days, and they have had no problems with the federal expenses as it relates to public safety on the 109. So right now, it's just general fund money. There's no restrictions on it any longer on that piece of it.
Okay. I have another majority leader had one question. Mooney and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman and Director, just to piggyback a little bit off of the Council President's questions, is any of this $20 million decertified ARPA money though? I understand once it goes in revenue loss, if it's not utilized, the revenue loss can still become decertified general fund. Is any of this $20 million decertified ARPA money? Or is there a way to do this?
To the council member through the chair, because once it gets in the general fund, it's kind of a pot of money. So we put 190 in right now. We have 160. So I'll kind of frame it like that. So right now we have 160 in the pie. We did put 109 in initially.
109 of ARPA money, Chair Director?
Yes, to the council person through the chair. Yes, we put that in last year's revenue recovery.
Got it. And what was that projection on revenue recovery? What did we expect out of revenue recovery? We put in 109, what did we plan?
Through the chair of the council person, we applied that all as the public safety expenses. So basically, we have public safety expenses, we applied that to meet the federal guidelines.
Okay.
And then it basically becomes general fund, right? Which helped us balance last year as well as balance the current year.
On the income tax receipts, Director, what does pretty good mean?
To the chair of the council person, we're coming in a few percent over what we projected right now.
And what was the projection?
To the chair of the council, I don't want to put a number there.
Do we have a preliminary, Mr. Chairman, was it estimate? Didn't have to
Yeah,
get
that
that
to us what's happening on.
So you can give us those figures.
Yeah, to the chair of the council, we'll get to those. I think the fine sector will give you a fine 12-acre.
Thank you. And Chair of the Director, on the $13 million for this 27th pay, is that number based on budgeted positions or filled positions?
Through the chair to the council person, this is actually what we're paying. So we took a look at currently what we pay. So this is
Filled positions.
those positions right now.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mr. Chairman, I would just note that, I want to learn more about this. Generally, I'm a person at this table supporting money into the rainy day fund because of its benefit to the books, benefit to bond rating, et cetera. But I think we need a healthy discussion as to whether $20 million out of essentially decertified ARPA money, or whatever you want to call it, if that's maxing out the rainy day fund right now, balancing, again, as a general supporter of the rainy day fund, let me be clear, but if that number makes sense. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Moody and Councilman Bliss.
Thank you. I have a couple series of questions. First is, 70 million is your estimate for all these payouts, sick and vacation. So how much are we expending on average a year?
So Chair, the council person, that depends, usually if safety people leave, so it can vary pretty drastically. But we're spending millions a year, some years for separations. So you'll see in the budget book, as we go through the budget presentations, that we have anything in the separation, a line item.
So you can't give me a rough estimate of each year. I mean, you can tell me 70 million. Is that 70 million for every current employee?
To the chair of the council person, yeah, that's based on the calculations from year-end region and audit. So right, the year-end, whoever was working for the city, we tabulated what they had on the books, we tabulated what they would be paid out for sick, what they'd be paid out for vacation. So that's an actual.
So did you amortize that over 30 years? And does this work out to about 3 to 4 million a year? You gotta have some idea.
To the chair of the council person, I mean, I would say it's several, 3 or 4 million a year.
Okay. And this is a rough estimate. We amortize that out. So right now, the next question is that's being paid just generally out of the general fund? That's a question?
To the chair of the council person, yes.
Okay, now listen, I see this practice, and in theory, I think this is a smart way to budget. I mean, a lot of cities do things like this, particularly Westlake and other cities. But my question is this, I think it's a smart approach. However, are we going to continually replenish this fund every year so that we can maintain it at the level that we project? Is that the idea? Because otherwise, this isn't really a long-term thing. So, I mean, that's the question. Is the idea to keep it at whatever the projected amount is by replenishing the revenue every year?
The chair of the council person, I think we'd have to look budgetarily what the revenues allow. Like we do the rainy, like we historically done with the rainy day. We take a look at the rainy day, we take a look at the current budget and where we could actually increase it. We would continue to keep that up. But this number will change, the estimate will change every year.
Correct.
I do a calculation every year, so.
My question though is simply, if we pay $5 million out of it this year, for instance, say it stays at 70 million, is the idea to put another $5 million in next year? Is that the idea of this?
To the chair of the council person, if the budget will allow it, I guess.
But that's the idea, to do that.
To the chair of the council person, yes, if the budget allows it.
Was that part of the legislation, that calculation, and that, or is it just to establish this one time?
To the chair of the council person, this is to establish it and approve the initial transfer, which is 90 million, 70, approximately 70 for unpaid leave, 13 million for 77 for unpaid leave, around 13 million for 47.
Okay, but there's nothing automatic in here where we would maintain the maximum rainy day or replenish what we're spending out of this new vacation sick time fund.
To the chair of the council person, that would all have to be budgeted annually or especially through council.
Or it could be part of this legislation, you're right. I'm not saying it should, but it could be a mechanism of that.
To the chair of the council person, it's not an injury, that could trigger an automatic appropriation in the general fund, and we don't, that historically we've never done that. So this is only approving the establishment of that fund and the initial transfer. If we had to transfer money in the future to keep it, we have to come back to council. Yes, council's approval.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Councilman Wayne Bliss and Councilman Chris Harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, all the colleagues, and to Mr. Gentile and staff. I want to go back to the first page. So at this moment, you're telling us, I want to get this straight right here, that there's $160 million cash balance that we're sitting here.
Chair of the council person, approximately, again, I changed it, yes, when we put this together, that's about where we were at.
And so as of today, we're about that down. So you've indicated about 109 million that you utilized, and then the $60 million. Okay. So going back into the volatility in income tax, and I will tell you, to all my colleagues, in all my years, we've never had that size, never ever, that amount of unencumbered cash at this point of the year. In my 13 terms, never ever have seen that amount of cash unencumbered, okay? Which is good on one side, but then it raises questions on the other. The volatility in income tax. I probably do too much reading for my own good, so I believe we're in a recession already. But yesterday at an event, there were several. I was at an event yesterday with several retired bankers, one from Key, one from PNC, and I forget the other one was from. They all told me the same thing when we were talking. They believe we're in a recession right now. And quite frankly, I don't understand the economic plan coming out of the White House or out of the House and the Senate. I don't understand it. I think most Americans don't understand it. And it's raising great concerns. And I think the reason why people don't want to use the R word, because as we run up to the midterm elections, a lot of people are worried at the implications of that. But there's no doubt when you look at how it's affecting businesses, how it's affecting families, working poor, elderly. Well, we're in a time that, quite frankly, that I have not seen. And so I'm really much concerned about as we go forward. So I don't disagree with the administration's assumption that we could be in for a difficult time toward the end of the year. I'm not going to argue that point. I think that we hope we're not, but that's a strong possibility because we're so dependent upon income tax for our revenue, and property tax, we all know, is nothing much to speak of when you look at the overall budget. So I want to go into the final page. The rainy day fund. And I want to follow up. So you've indicated that the administration's requesting of the council. And when I'm not clear on Mr. Chairman, I would ask, are you asking for specifically, does there have to be a piece of legislation for that, to move that?
Yes. Chair the council person, yes.
Okay, so, okay. And obviously you prepared already.
I've asked them to, if you want to jump in, that's one of the reasons I've asked them to come here first before we prepare the legislation, because I want to have a conversation with this council before we move to the full legislation.
Okay. And I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. So, so you're requesting another 20 million to go into the rainy day fund. Besides the rainy day fund, and now the $160 million of unencumbered cash, are there any other pots of money sitting out there unencumbered that you're aware of?
To the chair the council person, as far as reserves or available money, that's the two that's out there.
Okay. Okay. So then let me move on to the 27 pay, compensated absence, etc. Can I move over to the chart here? Okay. So, and I don't think the staff wants to put that back up on the screen or not. The 77 million. 77 million. The accrued sick, vacation, comp time balance. Who monitors that?
Chair the council person, I mean, based upon level of service, years of service, and your union contracts, you accumulate your vacation, you accumulate your sick. Some people do not use all the time, so the balance continues It's kept in chronos, so if you use time, it dumps off your balance at the beginning of the year based on your service credit. They add the number of weeks that you burn, and every week you burn 10 hours of sick time, that gets added. So every year, that's tabulated, and then what we do in my office for the financial statements is we calculate the liability that's out there. So everybody's sick time times 1/3, because you only get paid 1/3, right? How much sick, how much comp they have, and then we tabulate what this is. This is the general fund.
But that's the largest amount I've ever seen for accrued sick, vacation, comp time. I have never seen a bigger figure than that. Have you?
To the chair of the council person, it's probably a little bit higher now because during COVID time, people weren't really taking time off because they couldn't go. So it's not extremely higher, but it is probably higher because I think people didn't
But is there,
vacation time.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilman Conwell asked you if he could have a point, would you allow me to
Yeah.
have a point? Councilman Conwell, point.
I don't think that, you chair to control, thank you, visit you a lot unannounced, you all see me. I think that, I do have to visit it, man, I got a question, I need to get out and see what's going on. But here's the thing, I think also, here's my strong assumption, we're down 250 police officers, and we know attrition is higher also, and I think that has to also, because you budget these police officers, you budget people for safety forces, and we're not hitting our target goals. So therefore, since we're not hitting our target goals, I think that has to fall in with the cost of labor, through the chair to the controller also. That's my strong assumption.
Okay. And to the chair of the council person, I mean, that comes into play with it as well. But this is, the number that you see here is actual number, the auditor's wrong, we don't get it right now. So this is, you know,
But overtime would be a separate issue.
to the chair of the council person, yes, I mean, that's a separate thing, and that's what generally gets paid out when it happens.
Exactly. So again, I'm just trying to find out, so is there a rule of thumb, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Gentile? A percentage of the overall general fund budget with regard to that figure? Is there a rule of thumb as what that number should be or cannot be, or should it?
So the chair of the council, you're talking about the compensated absence balance?
This dollar, the 77 million, as a percent, because it's a percentage of our general fund.
To the chair of the council person,
The liability,
yeah,
it's just
it's a liability, it's a long-term liability, because when you look at each annual budget, we try to estimate separation, which would equate to paying these people out at that time. So in the annual budget line, the separation is where you see us paying out these balances. So each year, as people attrit off with the city, but sometimes it's hard because they don't have to tell you, they just say we're leaving. And in some cases, so we try to budget it based on our best case scenario. But that's where you see that it's millions. It's probably 3-4 million a year. Sometimes it's higher. We have a lot of it.
but there's no rule of thumb. It should not exceed this amount of dollar amount per year or anything like that.
To the chair of the council, I haven't heard that.
Okay. Then on the benefits of this approach, obviously, Mr. Chairman, the administration has thought this out. At least I hope you have. And the last page, the timing and considerations with regard to Moody's S&P. Is there a concern right now in the administration with regard to our bond ratings?
So to the chair of the council person, no, our bond ratings are pretty good on our general office. We're pretty happy with them. What we're looking actually is to be proactive and get an upgrade to make it even better, so we get to the highest. Just trying to get to the highest grade, which then our interest rates will be lower. The interest rates are rising now, generally speaking.
We understand.
So what we're trying to accomplish is the lowest interest rates we can. So if we get an upgrade from one or both of the rating agencies, we're we're gonna pay less interest expense on the bond issue. We'll save money when we try to, call out the budget.
So you're telling us that our bond rating is not in jeopardy, that this is to enhance our positions with the rating agencies?
To chair the council, that's one of the goals of
Okay.
this.
And so with the, and you're, and I want to just touch on, so right now, you're anticipating, not you, but the administration is anticipating, if everything goes according to plan, that we will end this year with a $62 million cash balance.
To the chair of the councilperson, yes, we're targeting between 60 to 65 million. That's kind of our target for year on.
Okay. So so we're in that range of 60 million, 62 million. Where's the $100 million going?
To the chair of the councilperson, that assumes that we're going to be transferring these two amounts out to these two funds. So the target of 60 to 65 does not take into account these transfers. So if these transfers happen to the rainy day and to the new reserve fund, then we would have around 60 to 65 reserve fund.
So that's where the $100 million vanishes. Goes to the
Advantage.
No, that's just right. But so a chunk of that is going to go into the rainy day fund, and then another chunk is going to go into this compensation absences. So the 90 million, you're going to need a piece of legislation for that as well, correct?
To the chair of the councilperson, yes, there's two separate pieces that will be coming.
Okay. And this is the first time we've ever done this.
To the chair of the councilperson, on the new reserve fund,
Right.
yes, this is a raised reserve fund, so the legislation will request permission to create the fund as well as the fund.
And then, Mr. Chairman, my colleagues, at their general fund budget hearings, will have to allocate funds for that fund, correct? It's not an automatic. I want to get that clear.
To the chair of the councilperson, if nothing's automatic, the budget for this year will be, if it's approved, it's 90 million, no additional funding unless council explicitly approves it, either the annual appropriation measure or separate. Doesn't automatically, there's no automatic funding of that fund. Just like there's no automatic funding of the rainy day reserve fund, we always bring
And what are you going to call this fund?
So the chair of the councilperson, it's actually going to be called the 27th pay / unpaid sick, unpaid vacation reserve.
You can't come up with a better name.
No, sorry, councilperson.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, we're going to discuss the ARPA fund separately, correct?
Yes, we are.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess I reluctantly support this, but I just have to say this, and I hope you carry this back to the administration. The challenge that every one of us around this table are confronted with right now, that services are nothing to write home about.
Not there, zero, absolutely.
Not there.
Service, major issue.
I was saying to some people yesterday, because I had to go to several events, and I've never gotten more complaints on high grass, vacant lots, abandoned houses. Never received this many complaints. Quality of life issues, police response, fireworks. I could go down the list, but I would only be saying what a lot of the colleagues I see shaking their heads around this table. So I think that the message has to be clear, as I hope you'll carry back, because you've been in your team here have been a long time employees to the administration, is that we understand the fiscal responsibilities and issues that this council is in charge with. We have a legal fiduciary responsibility to balance the budget and to maintain fund balances. But it's up to the administration to provide services. We don't hire, we don't fire, we can't deploy, and we can't administer. but we're the ones that are hearing it every day along with our citizens, our concerns. I mean, I had to go out yesterday on a dog barking, you know, and as I'm sitting in my car at this house, I'm thinking, wait a minute, something's wrong with this picture. Something's wrong with this picture. So I hope you carry that message back, and I hope all of us, when we interact with the administration, we carry that message back. There's got to be a better approach to delivering city services in this town, because it's not happening right. And I know you inherited, the administration inherited a lot of the bad decisions and a lot of things that weren't done the way they should have been done. But at this point, we're into 6 months of the administration, and we just got to collectively figure out how to get a better handle on some of this stuff, because I don't even want to think what the end of summer is going to be like. I got grass, I'm telling you, it's this high. Yeah, I got grass this high. You'd think you're in the wheat fields of Kansas. I mean, and if you live next to to that, or across the street from that, it's not making you too happy. And it's affecting your property values, your quality of life, and then everything else that is associated with that. Illegal dumping, people hanging out at these abandoned homes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why when I hope we get into the ARPA funding, as it pertains to demolition and some of these other things. But I will say specifically, Mr. Chairman, we got to figure out what to do with this vacant lot, grass money thing. It ain't working. It ain't working. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Keep in mind, we are going to have an ARPA discussion, and if someone asks you a question and it gets answered, please, don't re-ask the question. And then also, number two, I want to make sure that I leave ample time for the ARPA discussion. But then in addition, Chief Abunama and his team have said that this is really just the first bite of the apple. You guys can also schedule a follow-up meeting if you have follow-up questions with them regarding this, okay? I have Councilman Harsh, Casey, House, and Joe Jones. That's what I have, and then I'll go to the next one. All right.
Thank you,
No,
Chairman.
give me the point then. I got a follow-up point. But just a point.
I'll put you on the list, so then.
No, it's just a point, just a quick point. With the controller, sir, just a quick point. When, and Michael Valencia, he was right about our services.
Hold on, time out.
Just a point.
Because I got everybody else starting to chime in, and this thing won't start going off the rails. Give Councilman Conway a brief point, and we'll move to the next one.
You know what the controller needs to do? He needs to bring us the grid showing in these different departments where we approve money for labor, because you're controlling the cost of labor, sir, to the chair, to the controller. You should bring us a grid. For example, you're supposed to hire, let's say, 20 people in building a house, but you only turn around and hire 2 or 3. So therefore, we can do a fund transfer, but we're getting beat up in Ward 9, we're getting beat up in Ward 8, Ward 1. We appreciate you controlling the cost of labor. However, it's hurting us. And the residents, as Councilman Mike Valencia just mentioned, they blame us. So you should bring us a grid to show us why we're saving the dollars. We want to save the money, but it's some outcome measures there that you're not bringing to us in our year.
All right, Councilman Harsh, and then I forgot I did have Councilman Slight right before the case. Councilman Harsh.
Mr. Chairman, through the chair to Mr. Gentile, I feel like you're the Sherpa for this administration, sir. You bring everything to the table, totally. I think Councilman McCormick brought this up, but just to be clear, I last ran into Chief Agamama, and he said that projections for income tax collection this year are above, collections are above projections. So if that's correct, then we are either about to have the top income tax collection of all time or the second income collection of all time. Through the chair to Mr. Gentile, sounds about right?
Yeah. To the chair of Council, I think we're running around 2% over projections. That would take us to our peak, which would have been 2019. But it's definitely closing that gap if we continue on at this rate. But we've had seen a little slowdown in the last month or two on our revenue. We're doing really good. We're still doing good, but not quite as good as they were doing earlier.
But it's worth pointing out, Mr. Chairman, that the Chicken Little fear of the sky falling over people not paying municipal income tax doesn't seem to be panning out this year. Our collections are on pace for it. So the question, Mr. Chair, I feel like we are having an ARPA discussion, so I just want to make sure that I have my head wrapped around this. So through the chair, Mr. Gentile, we cannot spend ARPA funds on rainy day funds. We cannot send ARPA money to rainy day funds, correct?
To the chair of the council, yeah, that's correct.
But we can use it to put into the general fund to cover lost revenue because of COVID, correct?
Chair of the council, yes, that's.
Once that money's in the general for the chair, is that money all now wiped clean of being ARPA money, or is it still designated ARPA money in the general fund?
To the chair, to the chair of the council person, if you put it in there, considered bucket 3, and there's still restrictions. However, if you apply it to expenses, in this case, we applied them to safety expenses, so that met all federal guidelines. So once you do that, it's just general fund money, so it's no longer considered ARPA.
So through the chair to Mr. Gentile, so is the opinion of the administration that what's in the general fund is no longer flagged for a vote?
To the chair of the council person, that's right, this is just, it's part of the 160 million that we currently have of unencumbered balance, and it's general fund unencumbered balance now.
So through the chair to Mr. Gentile, is the administration planning to come back and ask us to put more ARPA money in the general fund to recover lost revenue?
To the chair of the council person, I mean, we have the new allotment, yes.
The second tranche. So this is out of the first tranche that we got last year.
Well, the 109 million, yes, that was moved last year,
And then we have another,
and then we
expense
expensed
this
it,
year.
yes.
Mr. Chair, this seems a lot like a sort of a bureaucratic shell game of just moving ARPA money off our plate into reserve funds where we can just hang on to it for later expenditure. So, through the chair, Mr. Gentile, can we then pull money back out of the, I'm sorry, if we were to allocate the 90 million as requested to the 27th week, yada yada fund, would we then be able to pull that back down into the general fund at a later date if we so chose?
To the chair of the council person, yes, if council rescinded that fund, so if we came back and said, hey, we want you to cancel this fund, or council proposed it, and you rescinded that fund, it would then go back to the source, which would be the general fund. But I did want to mention this, again, this is no longer ARPA money, it is general fund money, because we could not send ARPA money to a reserve fund, it's not allowed. So this is general fund, unrestricted.
Can we have a point of clarification? Sure. I think we have 2 points of clarification. Councilman Jonathan.
Mr. Chairman, can you Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Gentile, can you clarify that, what we're talking about now? So the money that we're talking about did come from ARPA, and it's already encumbered. Is the reason why you're saying this?
Can you just hear both, Councilman?
Mr. Chairman, just
Both.
give me clarification.
Can we get both?
Is it ARPA or is it general?
Hold up, real quick. We're going to do both at the same time.
Mr. Chairman, why couldn't council do a transfer ordinance to take money out of the fund? That was my point.
So you got 2 points. If you can answer Councilman Jonathan, Councilman Lewis.
To the chair of the council, last year we recovered $109 million in lost revenue. We did the calculation that was allowed by the feds. We were able to move that into the general fund to make up for the revenue we lost due to COVID. Then what we had, there's an option to basically reimburse expenses that are allowed under the lost revenue uses they can use for it. One of them is public safety expenses. So we then looked at the public safety expenses and we used that lost revenue to reimburse us for public safety expenses. At that point in time, we went off federal guidelines. It was no longer considered federal money. It's part of the general fund. That's how we would use it for the carryover and to balance the 2022 budget. It's part of the 109 is part of the 160, but it's no longer ARPA. There's no longer any federal regulations on that piece of it.
So
All
that's
right,
the 90.
Councilman Hart has the floor. Councilman Hart has the floor. And you got 2 points to the point he just answered. I got you coming up. And then Councilman Pulisic, and I want to let Councilman Hart finish it.
But it wasn't a clarification of the point I was making on the 90 million. So are you saying?
Can you do this, Councilman? Can you do that in your line of questioning? I'm asking you line of questioning.
Yes, Mr.
Because I want to make sure that Councilman Hart still has the floor, but Councilman, could you
Thank you.
give Councilman Pulisic
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
clarification? And then Councilman Hart has got to finish.
Chair of the council, the legislation that will be coming forward will include a transfer in both of those. fund for the rainy day transfer, there'll be a separate transfer ordinance. And then there'll also be one creating the reserve fund, and in that reserve fund legislation, for the 27 pay, compensate absences, there'll be an appropriation piece of that. That's transfer, so we in those two pieces.
Councilman Hart, just to finish my question.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, through the chair to Mr. Gentile. So, if the 90 million for the 27th reserve and the 20 million for rainy day all technically come out of the general fund, that's 110 million out of the general fund.
To the chair and council person, yes, it's 110. We're still targeting after that to have over between 60 to 65 our year target, which would, when you add the rainy day, the 90 million reserve and the general fund balance, that'll put us at about 4 months of operating expenses, which is pretty commonplace and prudent to try to have some level of total reserve.
Oh, okay. So, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Gentile, so would it then be the goal of the administration to come back and ask us to replenish the general fund with our funds?
To the chair, for the lost revenue, we will be calculating the lost revenue for 2021 and 2020.
So, Mr. Chair, then, it seems to me like the fund should be called the ARPA Reserve Fund, because we could then decertify and pull it back into the general fund at a later date.
To the chair of the council, I just want to clarify, I mean, it's not because this is from the 109 that we sent last year, and we've cleared it of all ARPA guidelines. It's being audited right now by the state of Ohio. So it's general fund money, so it's
I think the key word that he's using is replenish, and I think if we can get clarification on his statement about replenishing. Basically, you gave 109 last year that went to general fund. It met all the three of the ARPA guidelines for ARPA utilization. But in this upcoming year, you plan on asking council for another amount that will go into the general fund. That now is that replenishing the amount of money we're putting into the rainy day fund, or is that filling lost revenue? And I don't want to speak for the councilman, but if you can maybe along that line, I think that's what
that is correct, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to determine whether or not we are taking a huge chunk of ARPA funds and setting it off to the side through some accounting that could help our bond rate. And Mr. Chair, I'm not even sure that I'm opposed to this. I just want to make sure that I understand exactly what the administration is asking.
Thank you.
to the chair of the council person, we will be doing the calculation for lost revenue from 20 to 21 for the previous year, and looking to recover lost revenue that would go into the general fund.
And I'm sorry, Mr. This is really important. So, Mr. Chair, we might not have any lost revenue. We might recover all of our revenue this year. We're on pace probably to do. So the question, Mr. Gentile, then is, could we then replace the 110 we just took out as last year's lost revenue with our funds?
To the chair of the council person, we're going to be looking at 21 to 20, not 22. The calculation, the first
21
one,
to 20?
yes.
I mean 20 to 21.
I'm sorry. The first one was 2020 to 2019. The second one that we're calculating now is 21 to 20.
Okay.
So we're not talking about this year that we're in.
Which, I mean, we know how much that is. We know that is roughly $20 million, not a lot. Roughly, Mr. Chair, the 21 to 20 is about 20 million. We went from 410 million to 430. So, give or take. That would all be, we'd be able to back for 20 million.
Mr. Gentile?
To the chair of the council person, the inflator for the revenue went up, so it's a calculation that we'll have to do, because it was 4%, the Fed said now you can use like 5.4, so we have to take what we collected from the base year, there's an inflator, and then we have to see what we actually collected, and that, when we do that formula, we will get a number just like we did the first time. So it's not, I can't just use this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Hart. I have Councilman Slide and then Councilman Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just briefly, I also have a question on income tax projections specific to the reimbursement process. So if, through the chair, if someone who is working from home lives in a suburb, applies for an income tax reimbursement from the city of Cleveland. And does that money, who is the check cut to? Is it cut to the individual? Is it cut to the municipality that they live in?
The chair of the council, it's cut to the individual. We collected from that, does not automatically go to the other city. They have to file with their other city and then pay their other city if they owe them or wherever they live.
That's getting exactly to my point. Is there any notification to the other municipality? Are there situations where people would just be pocketing money that they owe because the municipality that is now owed the money does not realize that it's been reimbursed from us?
The chair of the council, I'll have to double check on that with their CC tax administrator. I don't believe that there is, but I don't want to state something that's not true. So we will get you an answer on that for sure. I don't think that we notify them. Most taxing authorities will get a federal, so yeah, we'll get you an answer.
Thank you, and I ask because it cuts both ways, Mr. Chair, and I think 2019 is the most recent data, but about 2 of 3 Clevelanders that are working don't work in the city. So, you know, if you are working in Westlake, for example, just like a Westlake's number, where income tax is 1.5%, you owe 1.5% to Westlake, and then you owe 1% back to Cleveland because of reciprocity. So I think that we should also be looking at, are there Clevelanders who are getting reimbursements from suburban communities and now owe that money back to Cleveland if they're working from home here per the same law here?
I'll talk to the tax administrator, and that's a good point, and make sure that hopefully we have a process. If not, we'll try to figure out how to lock that down. That's a good point. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good point, Charlie. Thank you. Councilman Casey, and then Councilwoman House, and then Councilwoman Jones.
All right, thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Gentile, just to kind of piggyback what Councilman Harsh and Councilman McCormick touched on, I personally believe this is a shell game that's going on. And you indicated that this is the $109 million, the $20 million is, the way you were able to wash the money clean was by running it through safety.
Well, to the chair, to the council person, not wash me, follow federal.
Okay, you follow federal guidelines. However you want to put it, right?
So to allow expense.
To allow an expense, but this was leftover dollars that were allocated but not expended. Correct? Because you said it was for safety, and that's how it was able to follow the federal guidelines.
Yeah, to the council person, there were certain, once you recapture lost revenue, there's certain parameters where you can spend it on. One of them was safety. Right, expenses.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gentile, how much was allocated then for safety?
To the chair of the council, I think the majority of it, we would allocate a little bit to health, because health's another. So between the health department and public safety, I think we pretty much allocated all of it, but the predominance was the public safety.
And then where did the additional dollars that you're trying to move over come from that were not allocated? That you're saying we met federal guidelines with, right? Because when they became part of the general fund, and you were able to follow the federal guidelines, and now they're no longer ARPA dollars, they're general fund dollars, and we're moving those dollars over. But weren't those dollars that we're moving over originally allocated for something, aside from?
Yeah, to the chair of the council person, once we put the $109 million, we met the federal guideline. That then fell to the beginning balance, which we used to balance this year's budget. So it's in. So basically, what we did is by putting lost revenue in, allocating the safety expenses to it, made the general fund money, and then we were able to then balance last year's budget and also support the 2022 budget. So part of the $160 million that we currently have right now in the general fund, part of it's the 109, and part of it's we operate. But once it's in the general fund and it's unrestricted, it's just part of the big pot. So,
Okay, Councilman Casey, Councilman Starr has asked if he can have a point. Would you allow him? Councilman Starr on that point.
Thank you, Councilman. I just have a point to the table as we're reviewing this presentation. I think what would be helpful more for us if we really have an executive summary of what's going on. I know a few times at these hearings and at this table, I mentioned, we pass pieces of legislation and ordinances all day, but then when it's come time for us to get a real good explanation at the table, it just seemed real macro, and we're trying to dive deep into it on the micro level. And I would be remiss if I didn't just bring that to our attention once again that, we're getting told or getting asked to push forward a piece of legislation on July 13th, where I think it's not even clear for us to understand exactly what they're trying to do. We heard the different terms of federal guidelines, moving money here and there, but it's really not, clear. And then back to something, back to what we're always saying, we get killed, or not killed, we get all of the rap and hear from all the residents when it comes to the services, but then we just transferring money, and you look at departments where they're short-staffed, and then you look at general funding come around in November, where we're gonna try to transfer stuff back, and I just really don't feel comfortable, Chair as well as council members with this piece.
Two things, and before I go back to Councilman Casey, once again, I knew that this would be this would be kind of complicated, difficult stuff to really deal with. I kind of was introduced to it last week. That's why I've asked them to come to the caucus. This is not the official piece of legislation. This is for them to kind of do an introductory to what they would like to do on the 13th. And then number two, I will tell you that in that, they will have a brief executive summary. And in between that time, Chief Abinama has said he will make himself available for any council member who would like to, drill down on this further. So this was intended to really just be an introductory and not really the complete legislation. It was more so to give you guys kind of an understanding of what they're going to be coming to us for in a couple of weeks. So I just would really want us to follow up with them. If you have individual questions, and Councilman, they will have a smaller executive summary that will kind of synthesize it at a later date. But I did want them to really help you guys understand what they're going to be asking for in another couple of weeks. Councilman Casey, I want to make sure you continue your line of questioning.
All right, moving on to the volatile and income tax. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Gentile, any of the businesses or corporations that have asked for a refund in the city, do they currently have either a loan with the city of Cleveland of some sort of economic development loan or anything like that, or any TIFs? Any of these businesses that have asked for money back or income are getting assistance from the city at all?
Great question.
I mean, to the I'm not sure why they're getting a refund. I mean, this is more, I was talking more about individuals than companies.
Okay.
Well, I'm rebate list. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, any companies ask for, okay, I'll start at the beginning. Any companies or big businesses ask for any refunds for employees?
The chair, the council person, the companies, as far as I know, will not be asking for the refunds. The actual individuals have to file themselves under their names. It will be through the company, and it's actually their withholding. It won't impact the company, but impact each individual.
All right, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gentile, have you seen any type of trend where the individuals who are asking for monies back may be associated with one specific company or business?
So, Chair, the council person, I personally haven't, but we can check with the commissioner, and we can get.
Can we follow?
Yeah, we can get to any answer.
So one of the things that we have committed to do, and I know Joe Tyson has been pretty much keeping track of that, is to have a quarterly meeting to go over finances with the finance director. So I would encourage us to really work with Joe to get that information for you. So Joe, if we can make sure we follow up with Councilman Casey's question, so when we have our next finance meeting with Chief Abinama, he can explain that to us. Okay? Exactly. Councilman Casey, please.
All right, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Gentile, when you guys presented the budget to us, for a month straight, we talked about the income
revenue to expenditures being $60-some million short in the budget. Are we still projected to be some $60 million short in income to revenue to expenditures?
So the chair of the council person, right now, we're still projecting sort of the same things, but revenue, we have a better handle, we already have a better handle that our revenues are coming a little bit better. So we're hoping that gap closes, and once we hit mid-year here in a few more days, we'll run reports. That gives us a pretty good snapshot, because now we're gonna have 6 months of track record, and do a really good projection for year end. We're hoping that gap's closed, because our revenue, first like 3 months was coming in really strong. It's kind of came back a little bit, but we're still trending ahead of where we anticipated revenue to go. So we're hoping that gap closes. So we know that, I would guess right now, if we continue along the same line that we're at, we will close that gap.
But there'll still be a gap.
To the chair of the council, yeah, I don't think anything's gonna close.
All right, and then Mr. Chairman, to our comptroller, can you kind of see where we know there's a gap in revenue to expenditures, but yet we've got money to move to a rainy day fund? How that looks? And then we also know, and even though this council's not part of the contract negotiations, right? We know that you're negotiating with 30-some contracts, and the word that's getting back to us, and it's just getting back to us, we can't say it's true or not, is that, you know, the administration saying we don't have money for the raises, or, you know, et cetera, just telling you what's getting back to us. So now we're hearing in contract negotiations, we don't have money for raises, or, you know, bringing our forces or our workforce up to regular base pay to be comparable with the rest of the state of Ohio. But then we've got money to move to a rainy day fund, and then you're still telling us that our expenditures to our revenue to expenditures is still gonna kind of fall short. Can you see where we're kind of like an octopus out here? We got 8 different arms going all over the place, and nothing doesn't seem to collaborate.
Through the chair of the council person, I think we're taking a look, you know, we're obviously looking at where we're at now, but we're also looking at where we may be in the very near future with the current economy and the way things are escalating. And we're trying to safeguard a level of service going forward by making sure we have enough reserves to continue to have enough employees to provide service. This continues with this price escalation, inflation, recession, and our income tax dip, like you see on a few of these slides. We want to have enough money to provide some, you know, a good level of service, or a decent level of service to the residents. So I think we're taking a look at that, especially the way the current economy is going right now. It's, you know, we're right about where our economy is heading, and we want to make sure we safeguard
And your
service to the residents going forward.
You're right, Mr. Chairman, the comptroller. Providing the services is the most important thing that we need to do in this city. One other question, Mr. Chairman, to the comptroller. The $90 million that you want to move over to the 27 pay thing, where is that money currently at?
The chair of the council person, that's part of the general fund, $160 million. It's currently in the general fund.
Right, so we have a balance of $160 million in the general fund, correct?
To the chair of the council.
And unencumbered cash. Correct. Yes. And is that money allocated for anything?
To the chair of the council. No, right now it's unencumbered, which means.
Okay, so out of the
$160
$160 million that's unencumbered, you want to take $90 million of it, and you want to move it into a special fund for the 27th day.
To the chair of the council person.
Could you give a breakdown of work this morning?
Yeah, it's $90 million to the 27th day unpaid sick vacation.
Right.
And there's $20 million to the rainy day reserve that will raise it from 45 to 65. So it's 110 in total between the two asks. We'll still have approximately 60 million. We're projecting 60 to 65 a year on it. After we make those, you know, if we make those transfers, we would still have that amount in the general fund. And the goal, when you look at the total of those 3 funds, we'll have approximately 4 months of general fund operation.
I get that. So, Mr. Chairman of the Comptroller, just so I got it right, there's $160 million in unencumbered cash. You wanna take that 160 million, you wanna put 20 million into the rainy day fund. You wanna take 90 million and create the 27 pay reserve, which only goes then toward money for the 27 pay in 2025.
And, I'm sorry, through the chair to the councilperson, and also separation payments.
Right, it all goes toward payment for employees.
To the chair.
Right, correct. Okay, so that leaves us 50 million in unencumbered cash.
To the councilperson, yeah, right now, currently, that would.
Correct. So that would be 50 million in unencumbered cash and a rainy day fund of 65 million.
To the chair, the councilperson.
So I think we could have our income to expenditures $65 million gap covered between the 50 million in unencumbered cash and the rainy day fund. So we're good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think we just figured it out.
Well, to the chair, the councilperson, yeah, if we were short 65 million and we took the 45 out of rainy day last year, we would still have been short 20 million.
No, what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, to the comptroller is that we had a $65 million shortfall, right? After we move everything around that you want to, the 20 million and the 90 million, we're still left with $50 million in unencumbered cash in the general fund. Right? Now we've got a rainy day fund of $65 million. Right? So we have a rainy day fund of $65 million and 50 million in unencumbered cash, which means we should be able to cover that $65 million expenditure to revenue income that you guys presented in the budget that was passed, right? Which means we shouldn't have a revenue shortfall for additional ARPA funds in the future, because it looks like we've got enough in the rainy day fund and unencumbered cash to cover everything.
To the chair, to the councilperson, if council appropriates the rainy day reserve fund to use what's not the intention, I would say.
Right, yeah, if we need to cover it because we don't know what the income tax is going to be. But I think we're covered.
Yeah,
right?
to the chair of the councilperson, well, I'm not gonna go that far, but to the chair of the councilperson, if there's a significant economic downturn, we come back to council and then.
But if we stay projected
We're
as
gonna
we
ask-
are, I think we're going to be okay.
To the chair of the councilperson, I still think we're gonna be having an operating deficit going in, but we'll see when the year ends and we present the next budget, but.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Comptroller.
All right, thank you. I got Councilwoman House and then Councilman Joe Jones. And keep in mind, after this, we're going to have.
Yeah, I just had a quick question regarding the income tax. So, can you, because I know you haven't, the administration did not report on how much did the city lose, if anything, regarding individuals asking for revenge? How much have people asked, requested back from the city?
To the chair of the councilperson, let me get you an updated number. I'm not positive. We are tabulating that, but as soon as this is over, we'll set.
Yeah, because I know when we had budget conversations, this was a concern. And I know we talked about having that reported to council, so make sure we do it. And then I think we had a lot of conversations about the different.
Councilman, Joe Tytry, do you have Councilwoman House's questions for follow-up? Because I want to make sure, I know we got a lot of conversation back there. Councilwoman House wants to make sure the
Just
amount of.
what was the amount of income tax recovery due to the stay-at-home? How much was it? Because I know there have been requests, I just want to know what the extent is.
To the chair of the councilperson, it's definitely way more than we've seen on the vision.
Right, and that's something that we need to, not just look at today, and I think that's one of the things in budgets, we are not looking at a budget for a year, we should be looking at budget for years. And I do not think that, as people are talking about like the reserves and things of that nature, I really think the city of Cleveland needs to prepare for like the next 2 to 4 years is going to be rough. We are not seeing, I really don't think we have a good grasp on what we are about to experience financially due to inflation. The cost of gas has doubled What does that mean for the city of Cleveland? And I think we really have to just think more intently about being good economic stewards, but also making sure that we have the appropriate people who are skilled to do the job, to making sure they're doing an excellent job. It is not good enough just because you are here any longer just to get a paycheck. And we have to start getting very serious about expectations from all of our partners, whether you're in a union or not, that your expectation in delivering services to the city of Cleveland are excellent. And if you fall short of that, we do not want your service anymore. And we just need to be there because, again, we about to go through some real harsh economic times. Anytime that you have inflation like this, you look, there usually are layoffs. You know, and people gotta get serious. So again, I'm gonna look forward, to these numbers, but again, I think we also need to, it will be helpful, I guess for me in the context. So when we did have, at times in the city of Cleveland's history of recessions and things of that nature, different points, if you all can provide some of that historical context of what happened to the city of Cleveland's budgets, coupled with now the varying changes in state laws that are impacting our things, I think that would be helpful if you could provide that to council members so we can start thinking to look to see how long maybe the lag time when something happened and how long it took us to recover and all that kind of stuff. If you could give us that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you should have that because the most recent years probably is it in, I think it's in this handout.
We have the graph, to the couple, we have a graph there where we can get the actual data behind that graph. It'll show like the last three kind of downturns, and then it'll show you how much we lost and how long it took to recover. You just have a graphic, it's a three-way graph, it's a three-way.
What page is that on? So that right.
But we can get you the actual numbers behind that. Like, you'll see it drops off pretty quickly. A lot of times it takes quite a while.
4 years.
That's what I was gonna say.
Let's see, 32,000.
Last time, 2008 was pretty much the most recent downturn, and then 12, 12, we didn't really recover until about 12, right?
Yeah, it took, to the chairperson, it took like 4 years to get back the income tax law when we had it, so it takes.
So then if that trend is pretty much, and to the councilwoman's point, if that's pretty much the standard, then we're probably looking at not getting back up to speed until about 2024.
And I think we also need to look at what type of federal delegation we will have. And I can guarantee you, the way that it's looking, we will not have an ARPA in 2024 or 2023. I can guarantee you that. So we really need to think long-term, not short-term.
Thanks, Councilwoman. Councilman Joe Jones, and then we're going to go to our next conversation.
Mr. Chairman, certainly I will be brief. I think a lot of the questions that were asked around the table kind of explain this out. What would be very helpful is when Mr. Gentile comes to the table to have a better breaking down so that council won't have to try to extrapolate out of you exactly what you're fundamentally saying at the table. It's very precise, it says what it says. It gives us a general idea and a snapshot at what we're looking at. What it sounds like to me that these funds that we have in front of us is in a preparation in a sense, preparing for particulars as it relates to a downturn. Would that be correct, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gentile?
Chair, the councilperson, yes, this is to set proper reserves for, to prepare, as well as to try to get a bond upgrade, which would then lower our interest costs and put us in a better position. So those are the major reasons.
And Mr. Chairman, I am under the same mind, I'm under the same thought, as we have to be fiscally responsible with how we use these funds. These funds were initially allocated for one purpose and one purpose only, and that purpose was to make sure that this city is fiscally stable. I don't believe that we should just be taking these funds and loosely spending them. That they need to stabilize the city. As you heard our colleagues around the table, some issues affect some sides of the towns differently than others. We see a lack of services on the east side of town where we're not really getting taken care of, and it's causing an impact on our communities as it relates to
being able to retain our constituents, and they're moving to the west side. And so at the end of the day, we're in trouble on the southeast side and east side of the city of Cleveland with these high lots. We would like to see the administration begin to start investing into services that work to change these conditions that we have. We have over 20,000 vacant lots. So, you know, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, to Mr. Gentile, you know, we're certainly glad to have you here at the table, still serving in council in your position. We hope that you stay a very long time, but it would be very helpful to make sure that when you're coming to the table, we don't have to answer all these questions because you have it already fundamentally broke down. There was one of the things when Mrs. I'm trying to think of the director before you, Mrs. Sharon Dumas. When Mrs. Sharon Dumas was here, I was able to ask her certain questions, and she would just, or she would have the issues and information broken down in such a way we would understand that. Request, Mr. Chairman, of information. We've heard a lot of talk about the city going in negotiations. I'm concerned, Mr. President, about those negotiations. I know that a lot of union people are looking at the council here at this table and hearing what we say at the table and thinking that we're going to be, they're not thinking about tomorrow, 2 years, 3 years down the line. So I know that some of those negotiations are actually being held up because they think that there's more money to be dealt with. And so I think that, Mr. Chairman, we need to close this. I don't think that these negotiations as fast as we can. I don't think that our city should be encumbering I don't think that our city should be encumbering a lot of debt, and then 2, 3, 4 years down the line, we're looking at laying people off. So I think that that's really important here. I am nervous. I think Mrs. House brought home the fact that we are in a changing economy. We are in a climate now where this country is divided more than ever. If we look at what is happening with our state, we don't have the funds that we're supposed to be getting coming in to help us in our city from the state. And then there certainly won't, Mr. President, be funds coming in, as Mrs. House stated, certainly from the federal government. So I would ask that if we could have some kind of tax income projections. I know Mrs. House has asked for past projections. Can we also look at maybe some look at where we are right now and what we potentially can be within the next 6 months to a year? I think all of that is important. I think that what you're doing with the funds that have already been allocated from the previous administration and what we're talking here about is important, and I think it's fiscally responsible. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. I think that we are blessed to have Mr. Gentile, who is with us to help us go through this process, and I look forward to sitting down with you and asking some of the other questions. I know the council has a long, lengthy agenda here, and I don't want to delay a little more time. So whatever questions I have, Mr. Chairman, I would yield to come back to Mr. Gentile to talk about later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you. And I'll just thank you for this. And if you have follow-up questions, who should they reach out to? Because there may be a couple of council people that want to drill down a little bit more on this.
To the chair of the council. I guess we can probably send it to me and to the director.
Okay, so Chief Allen,
yeah, if he's not available, I'll field them for him, but you know, we'll work together. We'll get you there.
Okay, all right, so just one other question, if I could, Chief and Director and Comptroller. The other question I want to make sure that we have is, what is our current bond rating? And also, what is the next step? The next step, if we were able to do this, what is the anticipation that if we are able to put this away, what the next rating would be? So I don't know if you're looking at Moody's, S&P, or whichever one, but I want to see where we are at present and where you anticipate or where you hope that they will bring us if we make this decision.
The chair of the council person, yeah, we'll get to that. We're looking for an upgrade of one level each, but we'll get to the actual rating of one level higher. That's what we're kind of striving for and we're hoping for it. It's hard to anticipate, especially in the second half of climate, you know, how they're going to react, but I think that, these two pieces in building this reserve that we can have with about 4 months worth of things will definitely, help that piece.
Okay, and just keep in mind, everybody, when you do the general bonds, that doesn't affect our capacity for operational lending that we have, but it does increase our bond rating where we can buy GO bonds or sell GO bonds and be able to increase our capacity to do roads, bridges, other things that we need as far as infrastructure.
Yeah, to the council, to the chair, yes, it does not impact general fund operations when we issue bonds. And if we do get an upgrade, it will actually could lower our interest rate with that, which would then lead to more money primary or restricted income tax. We can lower our increase our bond rate.
Okay, thank you so much, appreciate it. All right, let's jump into the next conversation. And I will preface this conversation by saying that there's been a tremendous, I'm asking Jessica if she could join us at the table just briefly, if she could. I'm going to take over more of this conversation, and this is going to be more about us having a conversation, but I did want Jessica just to kind of briefly go over and Ann to briefly go over how they justified some of these conversations around ARPA funding. Once again, let me make it clear. The city of Cleveland is in the business of making sure that we focus on city services and city infrastructure. I know that we've gotten requests all over the spectrum as far as what people have asked us to fund. I've asked for my staff to or our staff to look at a couple of critical things. I've asked for them, one, to really get input from all the council members. There's been multiple outreach made to the council members via personally, via phone calls, via emails, via every way that we can imagine, to give you an opportunity to give input. And then I basically asked them to put together a document that can compile those requests. Once again, we're dealing with practicality and not ideology. This is not going to be able to go to a bunch of economic development projects. This is really to try to make sure that we focus on critical city services and services that are needed to impact our families and children. So I've asked them to really kind of help us, give us kind of synthesize these requests. We only had a certain amount of dollars available, so I wanted to make sure that you guys understood how we got to these decision points, and hopefully this will be something that we can agree upon. And then the next step is to have a conversation, which I've asked Mr. Davey to come by just so that he can hear what we're discussing, so that we can reconcile what we come up with the mayor's priorities and his 10 priorities that he's put together, and come to some conclusion for how we want to have a good document that we can move forward. Now, keep in mind, this is the first tranche that we're really trying to deal with. We're not going to be able to get to the neighborhood-based things in the first tranche because there is so little money to do it. So what we're going to do is those requests that you've made as far as neighborhood impact projects, I know that I have a couple as well. Those will be discussed in the second tranche of dollars. And then you've also been given a sheet from the National League of Cities that can kind of give you a background of other projects, other cities that have done in order to help you see what's eligible. Now, this is never going to be easy because everybody has different priorities, everybody has different awards, but I want you to recognize that a lot of work went into making sure that we got everybody's feedback and that this document represents the voice of everybody giving comments to our policy team. And I want to commend them for really putting forth a lot of work to put this document together. Jessica, give us the rationale, and Ms. Tilley, give us the rationale, and then I'll take over the conversation.
Thank you. I'll just start. Frankly, I've come into the middle of the movie, having started in February, so I'm going to ask Ann to give the details of how this conversation began in the last session. But so far in the last 5 months, we have had initial conversations with a lot of you that really fall into very similar categories around housing, violence prevention, learning loss, some infrastructure projects. And so as you can see in the materials that we sent you ahead of time, again, this was just a way to start to collect a lot of information and really sift through a lot of the details and roll it up into, high-level, similar requests. Also wanted to address, I think, in the infographic that was really just a bit of spitballing, a way to start to communicate as an idea. As we're trying to, again, simplify and the importance of messaging to the public about how you're spending these dollars, we thought it would be a good idea to categorize those spends. It does say on the infographic Tranche 2, and I don't know if it was supposed to be Tranche 1, I just didn't want that to confuse some people. I know that Councilwoman Spencer called that out. I would sort of maybe get away from the specifics of the tranche, but really think about higher level, how we're going to communicate with the public the decisions that you make. And over to you.
Thanks, Jessica. To the chair and council members. So I'd say one of the most helpful documents that we did give you, titled ARPA First Tranche Summary for CP. You can see on that first page, this is the money that has been spent so far. And when I say spent, I want to be clear about what I'm saying.
I apologize. We don't. Okay, everybody, let me say this. There was a handout given. There were emails sent 2 or 3 different times. And I know that I don't think we have it on the screen right now, but I will tell everybody that there was a email sent out twice, multiple times, and then there was a handout that was put in everyone's box as well. Because I wanted everyone to have ample time to review this before they got it. So I apologize, but if someone could try to get it up on the screen, but I got to try to move on with what we got right now. Okay, you're going to send it to Steve. Steve's going to try to get it on the screen, and then Lisa, you can look at it on the screen. So Jessica's going to put it on the screen. But once again, I know for a fact this was handed out and multiple times. All right, and please proceed. I apologize to Steve. If you can get that up on the screen, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, to reiterate, we have the list of what has been spent, and when I say spent, I mean it has come to this body. We have said, yes, this is how we want to spend these funds. Where that is in the process of being expensed, encumbered. I more or less operated under the assumption if we said yes to it, we're going to spend those dollars, we're not going to claw it back. That is the assumption there. So you can see here, we're looking at those other things that we legislated, broadband, food, other various projects. So once we kind of take those out from the first tranche, we're working with about roughly $50 million left from the first tranche. So that's just a quick little overview of where we are. And then on the next page, we have, how we might want to spend the remaining balance. Like Jessica said, all of these ideas are not new. These came from you, us talking to council members, us hearing from you. We got a lot of great information. And I'll preface here, there is more than roughly $50 million here. So there is going to have to be a discussion about, what kind of rises to the top in terms of priorities. But we try to facilitate these into themes, whether it be 21st century neighborhoods, health and safety, housing and infrastructure, and wealth creation. So those are the large buckets here. I won't read it line item by line item. You all can read that there. But looking at everything that, we could write a blank check, it would be about $56 million. I would also iterate some of these programs are a little more granular than others. I think some are more thematic. Speaking specifically to something like workforce programming, we don't know exactly what that would look like, but we ballpark $5 million is how we would want to allocate that. Some of the others that are a little more specific, we either received proposals from those kind of specifically outlining how those programs function. So I believe that is everything to this document. Now I think I'll turn it back over to Chair.
Thank you so much. And the one question that I did have is that I thought that there was one other document that we were sending out. That was the document about leveraging it's leveraging the Marty McGann document. What was that? Where's that one at? I don't see that.
To the chair, that did not go out to council members.
Okay, that didn't come, so what was that, amount that they were looking at to leverage that one as well? OCL, yes, yes. What was that?
So, okay, I'm happy to share this with everyone. This is Cleveland Development, Cleveland Development Advisors, Opportunity CLE Loan Fund. The Opportunity CLE Loan Fund is a $50 million loan fund to support real estate projects that align with Cleveland Development Advisors' mission to promote inclusive and thriving neighborhoods in Northeast Ohio by providing innovative financing solutions and technical assistance to catalytic real estate and business development projects. The request is $7.5 million investment from the city of Cleveland, deployment beginning in 2023. Would you like me to send that to all council members?
Yeah, so just wanna, if you can send that to all council members. Now, they're looking at that not coming up until 2023, right? The spend. So my recommendation, you're gonna get this document, I would ask everybody to hold this, but they're asking $7.5 million from ARPA funds from the Cleveland Development Advisors that would then go into a $50 million that would be supplemented by public and philanthropic and corporate dollars in order to create a $50 million fund for economic development and real estate projects throughout the city. That is another ask, but I believe that one we may need to try to have a conversation about with the second tranche. Did you have a question, Councilman Parks? Okay. All right. So let's dig in and listen. I know that nobody's going to agree 100% on this, but once again, this is the recommendation, and want to make sure we look at this, and then once we look at this, then we could reconcile our priorities with the administration priorities. I'm gonna let the team at the table, they can stay in case there's any questions, but once again, this is our discussion, so all of these conversations need to come through me. I'll just go through the recommendations. If I could, you see them in the first tranche that's remaining. This was out of that 80 million or so that we did not pass last year. If you can remember last year, in November, the former administration has asked us to pass approximately an $80 million package in community and economic development opportunities. And we decided to hold it because we wanted to wait until the next administration came in so that we have a discussion with them. I'm going to ask if everybody can have their attention to this so that we can go through. First is 21st Century Neighborhood. This is along with modernizing City Hall, trying to make sure that we have streamlined information to City Hall, and they are putting it up on the board, so if anybody wants to look at the smart board, they are putting it up here. The second thing is to deal with infant mortality and morbidity levels in the city of Cleveland is a $2 million allocation to Birthing Beautiful Communities. Let me state this once again for the record. Birthing Beautiful Communities did not get any money from the state allocation or the state capital budget, and this is a company that does work around infant mortality and infant morbidity and do a very good job. The next thing is the violence interrupters plan to really work with violence interruption at the hospitals and to work with at the hospitals. The next one is considering a university hospital anti-fragility initiative, and we can give you the background documentation for all of these if you need them, but the university anti-fragility initiative is really working with parents and families who have had young people that have been shot or victims of gun violence to try to prevent them from retaliatory activities and to prevent retaliatory activities to them. So this is about how do you work with people that have been shot, because statistics show that when a person is a victim of a gunshot, that within 5 years they will shoot someone or be shot again, okay? The next one is the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center and Journeys to support victims of domestic violence and child abuse. We all know that during the pandemic, domestic violence rose significantly, and we know that we had women were victims a lot during that period of time. So we made a recommendation in that area. Canopy Child Advocacy Services to once again support victims of child abuse. We know that there's been a lot of victims of child abuse. These folks work in conjunction with our police department. They work closely with our police department at a location so when children are victims of rape, incest, and abuse, they have a secure place where they can go and work with our police department in order to bring justice to them. The next one, we didn't have a cost, but it's something that we really want to look at, and I know that Charles Slight, Councilman Slight, has some things that he has put together, and he's going to share some things with us that really is looking at first responder support for people in mental health, crisis, addiction, and trauma circumstances. We do know that that kind of complements the police work and the consent decree that we've had in place. The next one is free for CLE. We know that there's been a tremendous dearth of high-quality daycare and child care locations, and working with Free for CLE is a way to try to help them get into daycare and child care programs. The next one is a pretty healthy amount that we've required. Almost everybody on council has requested a fund to go towards home repair programs. So that's something that we've requested. The next one is one that several people committed at the ward level as well as the citywide level, and that's gap financing. Just to kind of explain it briefly, gap financing, you know, if you build a house here in the city of Cleveland, oftentimes it costs about $250,000 to $300,000 base, and a lot of times you don't have, you have a shortfall or a gap in financing. So in some of the middle neighborhood strategy, there has been a lot of conversation about trying to make sure that we have gap financing. The next one is Right to Counsel. You know that this is a council program. This is Right to Counsel. We funded this in the past. This gives tenants representation when they go in front of housing court, working with the United Way and legal aid. The next one is United Way 211. We know that during the pandemic, a lot of people needed somewhere to call so that they could be triaged and know where to go for services. So the next one that we've asked for is $500,000 to support 211 services. The next one is $5 million for rental assistance. That speaks for itself, rental assistance. The next one is Habitat for Humanity to support the home repair program. Habitat for Humanity to support not just their home repair program, but they will also use this to do housing, infill housing in areas throughout the city. Right now, I think they're in Bel Air Paradise. They're in Buckeye Shaker. I believe they're in about 5 neighborhoods throughout the city that they're doing infill housing right now. And this will help expand them building infill housing and also home repair in targeted neighborhoods throughout the city. We did not put a number for park and green space investments. That might be something we look at in the future. And then also we need to look at security cameras in the future. We did do some things around security cameras in the past. We did want to put workforce programming, about $3 million in workforce programming, and then the arts and culture. This one was something that a lot of people had a lot of questions about, but I did recommend some of these amounts for arts and culture. One of the things that a lot of people were not aware of is arts and culture really bring a lot of revenue into the city because a lot of those plays, concerts, shows, and other things, we get a lot of taxes and a lot of income in for arts and culture. So I have recommended $5 million for arts and culture. I do want to put a pin in Councilwoman Spencer and several others really asked us to put an emphasis on housing and really putting the emphasis on housing security. I do want to also make sure I remember and remind everyone that we did put a significant chunk into safety, as you heard earlier from the comptroller, as well as former investments. So we did put 23 million into safety. 3 million was plowed back into ARPA because it did not qualify under the guidelines. So we did put an allocation into safety and health already. What we did not do is put a coherent allocation into housing and community development. Last but not least, I want everybody to be cognizant. I made a lot of these decisions, and don't put this on the policy and research team. They did what I've asked them to do, and these are my recommendations as a council president. These are not theirs. These were not done arbitrarily. These were done after getting a lot of input and giving everybody a lot of feedback into what they consider priority. And keep in mind, we did put a significant amount into lead. We put a significant amount into other issues earlier already. So this is out of the first tranche, remaining balance of the first tranche. We do have the second tranche, and then we will go over that tranche and have a discussion. So this is the recommendation that we have, and I will open up the floor for a conversation. And once again, once we kind of agree where we want to try to focus on, and I don't anticipate us getting 100% agreement, but if we get a general consensus of this is where we want to be, then we will immediately start to engage Mr. Davey, Chief Davey, and Mayor Beer, and we will reconcile what the administration has in mind for this amount and what we have in mind. Councilman Harsh. I got you one. I got Harsh, McCormick.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question, nothing detailed. But could the council president explain why we're choosing to allocate the first tranche completely separately from looking at the second tranche? If there were, for instance, a program that needed more than was allocated here, we could look at the second tranche, but why are we looking at these separately?
I believe that part of the thinking in the first tranche was that these dollars have you weren't here in the last term, but the former finance director, Dumas, gave us a lot of feedback that we're kind of on the clock with these dollars. They gave it to us because they were an emergency. So what we don't want to take the risk of, and I'll be honest, I don't know when the federal government, because they're pretty unpredictable, but what I don't want to take the risk of is that we don't spend down these dollars and we don't make decisions on these dollars and allocate these dollars, and then the federal government says, hey, it must not have been an emergency, and I know I'm speaking in layman's terms, but it must not have been an emergency, so, and then start scoring us bad and trying to even worse, hopefully not claw money back. But Director Doom is more articulately explained it in the last year, but basically these dollars, you know, they need to be spent because they were given to us for an emergency. So the longer we leave them out here, the more jeopardy we have on not fulfilling what we are supposed to do. Now, I don't know those deadlines, Councilman, I'll be honest with you, but I do know that we were told several times that if we don't spend these dollars, we stand a chance of getting bad scores and bad grades and having a problem with the federal government.
So Mr. President, it's the opinion of our body that we are spending these funds under separate rules and requirements. Tranche 1 has a certain deadline, Tranche 2 is a separate.
It's not my understanding that they have separate deadlines, and I'm going to ask you, I know that you guys really want to go down, if you could, maybe we could take Councilman Jones to the side, because I want to make sure we stay focused on what we need. But if we could, the ARPA dollars, I believe the final rules are included in what they have sent to you. The rules have changed, to my knowledge, about 3 to 4 times since they first came out. But it is not my understanding that the rules are different from the first tranche to the second tranche. So the only rules that I'm aware of pertain to both tranches, but we were told, and this has been from several sources, not just the former administration, and I'm not sure if Chief Davis has been saying.
That was a big.
Now we know what you listen to. Now we know you listen to Kodak Black.
Mr. President, I'm not trying to get into the details of how we're spending. I'm just trying to understand, are we spending these monies separately for reasons that are dictated to us by the federal government? Or are we allowed to put all this money together and spend it together?
I don't think that there is a clear answer for that.
Okay.
I think that, the goal was, if they gave you this money, you better spend it. That's kind of the edict that we've got several times from the former finance director, as well as what I've read from the National League of Cities and others, and doing extensive research, that if they gave you this money, especially by Cleveland being the 8th largest city that have received these funds, they gave it to you to mitigate an emergency. The longer that you keep these dollars, the more in jeopardy that you become, because they say it must not have been an emergency. So that's what that's kind of the thought process. I know we have a lot of experts here. I know we have my good friends from the Center for Community Solutions and others that may be able to answer some of those things, but I will tell you that there are some time constraints in order to try to get these dollars out the door in order to mitigate an emergency. I'm starting to put my list together. Councilman Conwell, what do you want to do first?
Yeah, just.
Okay, Councilman Conwell is up first. Councilman McCormick. So,
looking at this grid here, and we voted for this, Mr. Chairman, back in November. Are you saying that, I know they gave us, I think it was 211 million, something like that, in the beginning,
205.5 million.
Right.
So we got a total of 511 million. Each tranche was 205.5 million apiece.
So we take care of that first.
So the first tranche we got in June of last year, that was 255.
Right. And then the second one.
The second one will be the same that I think we just got maybe last week.
Right, and then that one, we'll discuss that one.
We'll discuss that one at the later date, so we're trying to finalize the first tranche and figure out how we're going to spend the first tranche, and then we'll come back and have a discussion.
Because they broke it up, they subdivided, and so we gotta get to that point. And then we'll get to the other ones like, projects. Okay, cool, that's the only question I just want to be clear understanding.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Okay, so I have Councilman McCormick, I have Councilwoman Santana, I have Councilman Valencic, I have Councilman Jones, and Councilman Slight. Do I hear Harrison Starr, our House?
Yeah.
House, Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for research that puts this together as well. Mr. Chair, a couple thoughts. One, interested in, as we look at the housing numbers in here, how we are leveraging these dollars in the private sector. If we're investing $15 million in home repair, which I think we should do more than that, quite frankly, but how we're bringing in banks and other financial institutions to supplement and leverage these dollars. So just as a whole, thinking strategically about that, new construction and gap financing, same thing. So all of these elements, how can we raise additional dollars from the private sector to supplement this money? The other thing too I'm interested in, so I'm just glancing at the list, I'm very interested in housing, quite frankly, specifically and intentionally to address many decades of historic redlining in our community. So be it gap financing, home repair, I would love to see it, and maybe we think about this for the next tranche, put a lot more money put into this for our existing residents to stay in their homes and to build wealth. And again, intentionally with the understanding of the impacts of systemic racism and redlining, taking that into consideration. Everyone knows how I feel about the individual line items. I'm not a big fan of individual line items. I guess my question is, how do we pick some and not others? It's a concern of mine. So thinking about how do you justify that? All of these organizations, incredible organizations, but just thinking about how we justify one and not the other is a concern that I expressed to research and other folks as well. And maybe we go out for an RFP on these services and let others compete for them. And maybe these organizations would be the ones that would come out anyway, but just a thought for that. And then the other thing that I would just note that I think is really important would be a housing trust fund, for us to consider that, for affordable housing in the city. I think that's a really important element, but again, for me, I'm really interested in the housing aspect of this, specifically how you build wealth and work to reverse the impacts of redlining in the city of Cleveland. As kind of a longer term, and Mr. President, you know, I view all this as long term in the sense of we gotta be able to look back at 10 years and see that our demographics or indicators have shifted, right? Be it racial wealth gap, be it housing, redlining. So I just want to be careful that we are spending this money strategically in ways to address our root core issues, because we all know we will not see these dollars ever again. Maybe maybe Mike Lunsing is still here, maybe 150 years old, but anyway, so I mean, again, thinking strategically about housing is my big thing on this, and how we move forward with that.
A couple of things. I think that was the prevailing statement throughout everybody's comments on how do we stabilize housing and how do we make sure we deal with housing. A couple of things that I want to make sure that I underscore. That one is I've urged the policy staff, and once again, this is one of those blame me, I'm wearing the jacket on this one. I've asked the policy staff to stay away from personnel investments. And the reason that I've asked them to stay away from personnel investments is because this money will not be sustained after 2 to 3 years. So I'm a little concerned about if we use a certain portion of this to, say, hire police officers or firefighters, EMS or something, that if we don't have a dedicated revenue source in order to continue it, I had some serious concerns about that. Number two, everything that is on here are organizations that are either working with city departments already and have partnerships with city departments already. So they're not random social service agencies. A lot of social service agencies were sending us ARPA dollar requests and really trying to get us to put ARPA dollars in. And I can't, as I told him, I can't commit on behalf of all the council, but Blaine Griffin is not a big fan of plowing it into one social service agency over another because of what you said. But what I did feel comfortable with is looking at best practices and who's working with our police department and who's working with our internal staff on some of these issues already. So the violence interruption model, as you know, we funded them already in the past. The Canopy is an organization that works already with the Cleveland Division of Police, that the Cleveland Division of Police had already worked in partnership with children that are abused and experience sexual abuse and child abuse. Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. All right, we're gonna start having a fine for everybody. All right, but then the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center and Journey Support to Domestic Child Abuse. These are organizations that already work with the City of Cleveland Police Department. So what we try to do is have people who work closely aligned to city services. Last thing that I'm going to say is that this was about two things. One is making sure that we help stabilize and support city services. But then number two, make sure that we put dollars into areas and organizations that have populations that serve populations that have been disproportionately impacted. So we'll work with the administration on some of those things, and let me make sure I state this clear too. The reason I asked for Chief Davey to be here, because they have 10 priorities that the administration is, and once we settle in on a couple of things, we're still going to have to sit down with them and reconcile some of our thoughts with each other too. But that's how we came up with some of these lists. So I agree with you. I share the same thing, that I don't believe in picking one social service agency over the other. And you know, I try to find a way to justify how we can deal with the issue, not just the agency. Any other questions, or any staff, the policy and research team, Ann or Jessica, did you guys want to chime in? Because I know you guys pulled a lot of this. Anything else? Okay. All right. I'm gonna go to, who's next? Jasmine Santana's next.
Okay, great. You answered a lot of my questions. Look, I want to go back to housing. I'm looking through the list here, and I see that new construction cap financing. We got the Cleveland Development Advisors. We passed just the tax abatement. So a lot of these resources are going to developers. One of the things that I struggle with, there's a lot of development happening in housing, but there's not enough like rentals, not rental system, down payment assistance. And so it's like we could build all these houses, but if we're not helping the resident with some down payment or some types of resources to purchase these houses, it kind of defeats the purpose. So I just, if we could add that, I'm not sure if my colleagues agree, but.
I'm going to ask if I could, because I call him my resident real estate expert. Chris Hurst, could you tell us a little bit how gap financing works so that you can express why it was important to put that in there? Because I think it answers a little of what Councilwoman Santana is saying.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think the reason that gap financing is favored by a lot of people over down payment assistance is that gap financing makes the entire project more affordable to a wider range of buyers, whereas down payment assistance has to find the proper buyer ahead of time and get them approved for the program. So it's easier for new housing out of the market when you can write down the cost of that house to the consumer, regardless of who that buyer is, than it is to find that right buyer and get them approved for down payment. So overall, it's just an easier program to put out there. It makes the seller, the builder, a lot more capable of selling their product to a wide range of anybody who can, go get financed. And then it drops the price significantly for the buyer, so it makes it easier for them to get that amount as well.
So Chris, let me give a scenario to the Councilwoman's standpoint. If house costs, I'm just going to keep it simple, and I know that they don't cost this much, but if a house costs $100,000, you're saying instead of giving a homeowner $10,000 in order to have down payment assistance in order for that homeowner to be able to get into that house, instead, you believe and others believe that making the cost of the overall house go down to approximately $80,000 to $85,000 instead of trying to offer that $10,000 in assistance is a better prospect than to actually have the down payment assistance.
In a nutshell, that's correct.
Okay, but Councilwoman Santana may also, if I can expound about what she's talking about a little bit, it may just be existing housing. And existing housing, and how can we look at possibly putting dollars towards helping someone who's trying to buy, my family's trying to buy a home in the up neighborhood. How do I get another a significant amount of money, $5,000 in order to help them?
Yeah, that seems to be the challenge for people that want to buy houses, is that huge down payment. But going back to new construction, are we talking about market rate construction, or are we talking about,
all of these would have to be affordable things, but Councilman Hurst, did you have a point?
Mr. Chairman, the councilman is asking the exact correct question. You have to build a program in such a way that what qualifies is going to be good for the people in our community. So you're absolutely right, Councilwoman. If you do gap financing, you have to have built into that program requirements on the builder and the final sales cost, so that we know that the product that's being used with this program becomes available to people in our neighborhood. It absolutely has to be done. If we don't do that, then the whole program fails. That's an absolute essential part of this, is that we have to be able to control those outcomes.
And whatever we do, we're going to have to sit down. I keep pointing to Chief Davey. Whatever we have to do, we're going to have to sit down and really flesh out details. We kind of just put everybody in the ballpark. So, Councilwoman, to your point, what we can do, because I hear you loud and clear, we can massage that line item to maybe parse that out a little bit so that it can cover a couple of those different things. And it sort of goes to a little bit, and I know he can expound on it, what Councilman McCormick said about having a housing trust fund that can help be a little bit more flexible with the law. And then I do want to talk about the opportunity CLE. The reason why that is important is, to Councilman McCormick's point, is because if we put $7.5 million of ARPA dollars towards Operation CLE, then their committee from the private and philanthropic sector to grow that pot to be 50 million. Now, all of this, all of this would have to be going towards low-cost mortgage and affordable housing. This, in no way, shape, or form, and I can tell you this, I am going to be looking under every rock to make sure that we do not allow this to go to a bunch of rich developers that are trying to develop the city. That is not what this is for. What I've become very, very adept to is that housing insecurity is a huge problem in our city, and this is to really try to shore up housing security and promote affordable housing and home ownership and leverage those dollars so that we can get more money from the private sector. So I know that Chief Davies is listening. Like I said, this is just a draft. He may have some ideas, and Mayor Bill may have some ideas on how we can reformulate this. So I don't want people thinking this is the end amount. I just wanted to get us in the ballpark so that we can negotiate with the administration. Okay?
Well, maybe we could go community benefits forum attached to that. Going on to, okay, home repairs. I know that this was a conversation that we previously had. I know we put home repairs for senior citizens. I'm curious to know if we're changing the income guidelines and the age. Most of the people, families are reaching out for home repairs or like the working poor. And just wondering, or is this solely for senior citizens?
The senior citizens carve out was when we did the tax abatement conversation. We would have to have a program that would be administered and created by the administration that will cover how and who would be able to do that. I think this council has kind of made its mind up that we believe that AMI for affordable housing should either be 80% AMI at the low end, or I believe it goes higher. So 100% AMI at the high end or more. So those are things that we would, if we agree upon this and we work with the administration, then they would give us how the program would look and operate, because that's what the final piece of legislation, once we get it, would look like.
Okay. And then last but not least, going back to the workforce programming, I know my colleagues on the workforce development committee have been meeting with all types of organizations. I think we have a sense of where we can allocate these dollars to really impact workforce in the city. And so I'm curious to know, has this been established? How do we get with the policy team to draft a program or initiative?
It has not been established, but let me jump in if I could before the policy team addresses this. It has not been established, but that goes back to Councilman McCormick's point. There will probably have to be some kind of RFP process in order to make sure that we do it in a clean way. But what we can do, which I think your committee has done a good job of formulating already, being familiar with some of your work, is we can say this is the type of program and the type of workforce program that we want. And then the administration can work with us as far as the RFP in order to find what organizations will apply for that. But what we probably cannot do is direct awards unless it's somebody already doing the function of the city of Cleveland. But did you guys, Jessica and Ann, tell me what you want to respond to that?
I'm so glad you asked the question. Brooke and I have been doing some background research for you and your vice chair around what we would name a citywide workforce initiative. So we're happy to fill you in on that research, and then you can take it and do what you like with it. But similarly to as the council president said before, it would be in partnership with a lot of the organizations that you've called in front of your committee and that are already working in this space. YOU, the GCP, PACE program, and so on.
Thank you, President.
Thank you, great questions. Councilman Joe Jones, and then Councilman Mike Valencia, Councilwoman House, and then Councilman Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talked about first and second tranches. On our first tranche, can you elaborate? Was this a total of 53 million that we received that we actually went to ordinances?
Yeah, so there is a breakdown to show what we've already spent.
Is that 53 million, Mr. Chairman?
No, we've already spent, is that 202.9 million. So on the first page, if you look at it, we had 2.29 billion. The first tranche was a total of 255.9 million that was received last year, and we spent 202.9 million.
Okay. So the allocation of 53 million, is that part of some of the ordinance that was spent?
The 53 million is what was left over after the spend down of 202.9 million. So after that, if you subtract, if you have 255.9 minus 202.9, my Youngstown Public School Education tells me that's 53.
Right. So the allocations that we have spent so far in these projects, in those ordinances that we have listed, part of the revenue recovery at the top was a part of what the finance director brought to us, Mr. Gentile. Is that correct, Mr.
The revenue recovery that they did was 108, and then just as a caveat, if you listen to him closely, they put it into the revenue and they spent a majority of that on safety and then some on health, so that they could meet all of the three criteria that allow them to spend revenue recovery dollars on emergency pandemic.
So, Mr. Chairman, right now, have we spent the money that is in the ordinances referenced here?
They have been let out. I believe that most of them are still, I believe so, but I can't answer. And you have a question?
To the councilman through the chair, I would note that there are probably about, rough numbers, 3 to 4 pieces that have actually expended the amounts. Everything else we've authorized legislation for. They're either in the process of, inking a contract or writing a contract. So these funds are in different stages of the process, but we're assuming that they're all accounted for and we're not going to touch those funds.
And Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Tilley, what areas have already been spent in these ordinances?
To the chair, I know for certain, Greater Cleveland Food Bank, some of public safety, I will follow up with you with the actual numbers and amounts, because I don't know them off the top of my head.
The only ones that I do believe that they were still looking at doing a contract on are the Neon Hitchcock and the Neon Hitchcock and Allen Estates one. I think we're all still working out contractual language, but they have been allocated towards them already.
So those are the two that they're spending it down to Allen Estates and Neon?
They are going to be, once they have the contract with the actual developer, the person that's doing the affordable housing part, that's what they will do.
So those will be the other two? We will support it, Mrs.
There were 3 or 4 pieces in HUB that were for people impacted by affordable housing. The reason that they are probably not spent yet is because most of those pieces still have to go through making sure that they have all of their financing in place and have all of their other things in place with the developer before they get a check gets cut to them from the city.
I get it. The question was, how many of these contracts have been spent? There was 4 that's supposed to be spent. Mrs. Antilli told me about 2. What are the other 2?
No. I think that was
out of the contracts we have under ordinance right now, Mrs. Tilley stated that
all of this money is in all of the
contracts that are being spent.
Let me tell you, all of it is encumbered. So
okay.
All of it is promised.
So we don't know if it's been spent.
All of it is promised. You don't know if that actual, especially Allen Estates, has not been spent. Okay? I will tell you that. Let me go through each one. Revenue recovery. I'm going through each one. I'm going through each one so that we can make sure that everybody got a clear understanding. Okay? Revenue recovery. Spent is gone into the general fund. Right. Broadband. There will be an RFP that will be coming out this week. So the money in the check for $20 million has not been spent for broadband, but an RFP will be coming out this week. Greater Cleveland Food Bank, spent. Department of Public Safety, spent. Lead Safe is still finalizing their contract. Allen Estates, when they finalize their whole financial package, they will get something from these ARPA dollars, but there is not, to my knowledge, been a check cut until they actually go through the final stage of their contract. Neon, same as what I just said. Hitchcock Center spent. Huff, 9410 Huff is, I think they're still going through their contractual. Demolition, we allocated those dollars, and Councilman Harrison, correct me if I'm wrong, that was spent, that's given to the Community Development Department, and then the Department of Law is spent. That 191,000 is spent for Bricker and Eckler for them to contract to make sure that every dollar that we spend is allocated. That is the status of each one, and I'm almost 90% certain that that's the case. And they can correct me if I'm wrong.
You know what, Mr.
Councilman Conwell would like a point. Would you allow Councilman Conwell a point?
I will give you.
Councilman Conwell, you have a point.
Thank you very much. You know, Mr. President, you just narrated that to us, and which is beautiful. I have to go down to Gentile. I visit him frequently. The gentleman that just left, and he has to, narrate and tell me what you just told me. Is there any kind of way that they could give us some kind of update or progress review to spend or an evaluation process? I personally, unannounced, knock on his door and say, where are we at the Hitchcock Center for Women? Or where are we at for the Rape Crisis Center, the $1.2 million and $800,000 for domestic violence? And I should have to ask the question.
They actually did give us a reconciliation of that today. In the first part, they actually showed where they spent some of it at, but they do have that document, and I have asked them to share that document.
You know what, Mr. President, that's because I had to get blank, and he needed to bring it to council. But I should have to tell him that it should be an automatic.
Okay. All right, I got you. I did, Councilman Jones, Ms. Tilly, and Ms. Columbia wants to finalize the conference.
I mean, I don't need any other finalization. I think for the question I asked is which funds were spent. So I think that you, Mr. Chairman, eloquently broke the whole piece down. Now, I don't know what you would add, but go ahead, please.
Did you have anything else?
To the councilman through the chair, I would just add that we are in regular staff communication with Chief Abanama, who shares with us, to use their language, what has been budgeted, what is encumbered, and what is expensed. So we do have that information, and I'm happy to provide the most recent update that we have to you.
All right, anything else, Councilman Jones?
So, Mr. Chairman, when I look down at the next piece here, that's on the view of the tranche terminology is being used here. We have 56 million. So this is all part of the first tranche, what was left over, which was 53 million plus an additional 3 million.
Yes, sir.
And where does that 3 million come from?
Right now, we're probably gonna have to find a way to cut down that 56 million to get under that 53 million.
I see. So, and this, Mr. Chairman, is the recommendations of you as the president.
This is the recommendation from me as the president, based on feedback from all of council. And once again, the only thing that was left was the amount of money that we did not pass last year in November. We said we wanted to wait till the new administration came in and work with the new administration, and we decided as a council not to pass it last year. So this is just finishing up the first allocation, because I want to make sure we.
And Mr. Chairman, that's 255 million.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman,
we never, to that point, Councilman, we spent on the health side, we spent on the public safety side, we never spent on the community economic development side. We held that part out. And I know Councilman McCormick and some others are here, they may be able to underscore a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there was unanimous agreement amongst the council last year that we wanted to move forward with the public safety spending because of the urgency of that, as well as the demolition spending because of the urgency of that, which is why we held back the CED dollars to then deliberate this year. There was also a feeling that there wasn't consensus really last year amongst the process. There wasn't enough engagement, as we discussed quite a bit last year, and so that's why we launched more process to engage directly with council members, individual interviews, and then to kind of review those priorities.
Right, thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Chairman, looking here at what we have allocated, we have a second tranche that's supposed to come out with 255 million, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So have we already started talking about how we're going to spend that 255 million that's remaining?
The administration is looking at theirs, and yes, we're going to start having the same conversations with our policy team. We just want to close this gap on this amount. And then yes, we are going to start moving towards the next batch so that we can have a thorough discussion on it.
Mr. Chairman, if the council is, doesn't feel comfortable with this tranche here, can we amend this tranche, put in new concepts and ideas different from this, Mr. Chairman?
And you can always put in ideas. I will tell you that budgeting by a process of 17 members is always challenging, and I will tell you that after looking at the data, the input, and also working closely with the policy and research team, this reflects sort of the consensus of council. So if there's ways that you want to reiterate or redesign this and you have a different philosophy, I won't stop you from doing that, but what I will tell you is that this document, unless council members can tell me otherwise, really represents some of the thoughts, ideas, and process in a very thorough, systematic way that council has given input that they said they would like to see that touches every neighborhood throughout the city of Cleveland.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to kind of engage, when is our deadline to spend this money?
Just as I told Councilman Harsh earlier, I don't want to create, say, artificial deadlines. I will tell you that we have been told that this money was sent to mitigate an emergency in the city of Cleveland. So therefore, the longer we drag these dollars out, the more in jeopardy we are in with the federal government. It is my hope, in order to walk away from this caucus and begin to have a conversation with the administration, because once again, the administration has to give input. There's 18 elected people in 601 Lakeside. That's Mayor Justin Bibb and 17 members of council. So it's going to be our job and our responsibility to really kind of sit down and go back and forth with each other and reconcile our priorities. So it's my goal to walk out of here with council's blessing to begin to have those discussions with the mayor, because the mayor may want to adjust some of these amounts too, and he and I will have to have that discussion as well. So I don't want to keep beating this up, especially when everybody has had ample time, at least 2.5 more months to really engage the policy and research staff and myself. I'd really rather try to get this tranche and begin to talk with the mayor's administration about priorities so that we can reconcile priorities.
Mr. Chairman, then of the next tranche that's going to come here, what will be available for council to spend? We have 100 million here. We got that we're making a recommendation for, a part of which we've already made a recommendation for, and another 50 million to spend. Will we have the same amount in the next tranche?
We're going to go through the similar process to identify citywide projects, but then I have asked council members to let me know if there are critical things that are helping your community. For example, I know that I have programs that really helped a lot with COVID-19 response in 3 different ways, regarding healthcare, regarding resources, and regarding food services. So if there's things like that we're looking at doing, those are things that we're looking at trying to focus on. Once again, as I told Councilwoman Santana, I will fiercely debate and I will fiercely push back against someone who does not put forth something that is disproportionately impacting our city or helping to support city services and city infrastructure.
What was that again? Can you repeat?
I want to make sure that we keep our focus of these dollars on city services and city infrastructure and things that have disproportionately impacted city residents, like domestic violence, lead exposure, and those kind of unintended impacts of COVID-19.
So Mr. Chairman, I look forward to be really engaging and I've sat here at this table and I made comments back in last year when Kevin Kelly was the president of the city council. And I talked about the importance of how we come together as a body, really sit down and fundamentally make a day out of talking about these fundamental issues as a group, as a caucus of 17 members, and putting buckets aside and really fundamentally making it a day, a working day. I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, as a suggestion, that we do that, because one of the issues that are very concerning to me is that the former administration did a survey. And in that survey, they asked the citizens of the city of Cleveland, what are your top priorities? And one of the things that came back was safety was an issue in our city in terms of not having the manpower out on the streets. Other one was city services.
Good, understand.
And it was a fun.
What I was going to do, Councilman, I apologize. I was going to look, I'm looking for my team, but Joe's not here. I just want to make sure that we can follow up and get that survey for a councilman, because I want to make sure all the councilmen get the surveys out. That's what I was looking for.
No, thank you, Mr. President. So for me, in my neighborhood, when I look at what we have already on the books, most of this doesn't really fundamentally have a real substantial impact on those areas that are critical for me, what I call my bread, potato, and meat kind of chart. And so I don't see anything here really that's going to really make a difference in my neighborhood. As you heard our colleagues, Mike Polensik, talk about the fundamental issues, we hear really a lot of issues fundamentally. There's the process, unfortunately, in city Cleveland is broken, and we're not doing the things that as council members, our citizens want us and need us to do to improve the quality of life. So for me, it's being able, how do we touch and feel and see change? And right now, I don't see it happening in my commercial districts like it's happening throughout the city of Cleveland. We have no housing development that's happening in our neighborhood. We have a failure of the city to make our neighborhood a priority in the last 20 years. And we see other neighborhoods growing around us like Little Italy, University Circle, downtown, midtown. We see developments all across the west side of the city of Cleveland, not just in the millions, but hundreds of millions, and $500 million in one ward alone over the course of 8 years. And so we, on the east side, southeast side of the city of Cleveland, would like to see some of those investments come and just do the basics. So if we could get resources, Mr. President, that would help us, and I think Jasmine Santana talked about it, Mr. Harsh talked a little bit about how we refinance and how we engage development. Those would be some of the items that I'd be interested in talking about, how we improve our commercial district and how we do and bring services to our community. And so I would suggest, Mr. President, we kind of like sit down and talk about that, because I would hate to see this last tranche of funds, which is $255 million, being spent the same as we're spending it now. And then lastly, Mr. President, I would like to see a budget of these funds from these organizations that we've allocated these funds currently to. What is their fundamental breakdown? How do they come to the request of the funds that they're asking for right now? So I think that they owe that to this body as a matter of public record. How are they going to spend these funds and what are their budgets? And one of these, and I must bring out because this is really important, one of these initiatives that we have here is dealing with Violence Interrupters Cleveland Plan. I don't know if this is the same group, but they've done absolutely zero in my neighborhood. I've tried to engage them to deal with drug issues and violence and gang issues. And earlier when you heard the musical outlay, that was a video of youngsters who are 11-year-olds, 12 years old, 13 years old, 15 years old, brandishing guns and putting video together and talking about bodies and being a part of killing people in the city of Cleveland. We have a real issue in our neighborhood, and we really need to fundamentally deal with those issues. You see the seriousness on my face because I'm dead serious about it. Our neighborhood has set up meetings where we actually fundamentally talk about how we slow the traffic in our communities that are overrunning our neighborhoods, smashing into poles. You can go on any given day down Harvard Avenue or down Lee Road Avenue, and you will actually fundamentally see an accident if you stay there long enough. We are in a crisis mode in Ward 1, and we need to have resources, and we need to have it actually fundamentally right now. We need to have it yesterday. We needed to have it 6 or 8 years ago. So when I see this kind of money being spent on these kind of programs that really don't do anything for my neighborhood, that's a problem. So I want to work with you hand in hand for this next tranche, because we need to get something that's gonna, people can touch, feel, and see. So what I do, Mr. President, will yield to you. You are our president. I appreciate you having the sessions that you have with the council in terms of the caucuses to bring this information to us. And I look forward to engaging you, Mr. President, and Mr. McCormick in a very close way to see how we spend this next tranche of resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman. I just want to underscore a couple of things. The reason that we did not pass that first tranche is because we wanted to give the new administration an opportunity to engage and to make sure that we got their ideas, input, insight, and priorities. Number two, we did spend money on safety and health. As you remember, we had a significant capital outlay on safety, on cameras, and other things that we did spend money on. Number three, I will tell you that I have already begun talking to the Department of Public Safety and others about expanding camera coverage, real-time crime centers, drone coverage, and some of the other technology needs that we should have in order to fight against crime, even tools to even better mitigate crashes and other things during high-speed car chases and other things. There's technology out there that I've asked them to look at for that. So we're trying to do all of those things that you're talking about. But one of the key things that I think this does accomplish, that it does give us a more even-handed across the city spectrum, because one of the challenges that I'll quite frankly put out, the council people in the edge parts of the neighborhoods, they felt that the first strategy did not affect their neighborhoods. So when you talked about Bel Air Pier, Camps Corner, Lee Harvard, Collinwood, a lot of those council people felt like the first tranche we did community and economic development did not address their needs. Many of those council people, and I really paid close attention to them and listened to them, really made some of these suggestions that really would benefit everybody. So that's the way we try to look at that so that you can understand the strategy. And the next tranche, we will make sure that you'll be engaged just like we did before. I don't think that it's enough time to do just a one-day get together and have a discussion. I really tell you that it takes a lot of time. The policy and research staff have been working on this, and I probably sent about 3 drafts back to them. So we've been working on this for about 2 months, and every time I tell them, make sure, even if you need to call and grab a council person, do so that we can get input from everybody. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows this is an inclusive process. This is not just Blaine Griffin's document. All right? All right, thanks, Councilman. Councilman Mike Melissa, Councilwoman House, and then Councilman Stone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my colleagues. There's been a lot of good questions asked. First of all, could somebody tell me what tranche means?
Allocation.
I mean, why can't we use some
allocation
word
that's what it means.
people can understand? I keep thinking in my head, like I'm in a trench somewhere. Okay?
You are in a trench.
I've been in the trenches for years, but I better name tranche. Okay, sounds like an infectious disease. You got the tranche. Okay, Mr. Chairman and my colleagues. Okay, I just want to understand the mechanics a little bit. We know we've got the 203 allocated already. This next bracket of money is 53 million, but you total 56 million in your remaining balance. So I'm assuming that that's going to be coming out of the second pot of funds, right? The additional 3 million.
No, we said earlier we're going to have to probably cut this by 3 million. So we're going to have to find 3 million.
Okay. Then that's okay. So then my other question is this, Mr. Chairman. We were all asked to put together individual ward projects. So I'm just understanding the mechanics here. At some point, we're going to discuss those individual ward projects.
Yes, so what we looked at is, what we want to do is that there are critical ward projects that help, that every council person knows their ward very well. And there are critical ward projects that each council person are looking at. Like, for example, I'll just put it out there, I have a program called Food is Medicine. They did everything from provide COVID-19 shots to provide food, to provide emergency access. So what I gave everybody a copy of is the National League of Cities, and I'm going to show everybody this again. Try to find it. I gave everybody a copy of the National League of Cities document that looks something like this.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So if you look at projects in your neighborhood that look like this, that what I can tell you touch several different areas: health, safety, and disproportionate impacted communities, those are projects that we will take a look at, and once again, we will consider and have a conversation with the mayor. I will tell you that there were some wards who submitted nothing, and the reason that they submitted nothing is because they said that they don't have certain projects that they believe will qualify.
Yes.
So that's the way we're trying to lead it.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, my old colleague, out of the remaining balance, you're gonna, 56 million you propose, put before us, we're gonna have to cut 3 million out of it.
Yes.
Somewhere, reduce some of the allocation.
Yes.
So that when you have the to be determined, we don't need, so basically for all practical discussion points, those are basically gonna remain zero, correct?
Pretty much, yes, sir.
So the middle neighborhood strategy will be zero, security cameras zero, parking green space zero, Adams board zero.
We just have to have a conversation with the mayor's office about some of those. We want to put some of those in there. But let me state this, because I do want to speak to Councilwoman Spencer, who's not here. We do want to fund and put a significant amount into the middle neighborhood strategy.
Okay.
And we do know that there's a middle neighborhood strategy out there. What I'm hoping for in the next bucket of dollars is to have a conversation with the mayor's administration, because between the middle neighborhood strategy and the Southeast Marshall Plan that they're trying to do, I want to make sure that we align both our hands as far as that.
So, okay. So the other question I want to raise is what I raised during the first part. When I want to have assurances, not just out of you, Mr. President, but out of the administration, as it pertains to whether it be home repair programs, the new construction, gap financing, the demolition that we passed previously, that there be some equity, there be some fairness in the distribution of those funds. That's, no.
Whatever we do, there will be equity. And whatever we do, now let me say this, and I'm not going to get on the soapbox. Fairness and equality is different than equity. All of us have areas in our ward, yours included, as well as Ward 17 and every other ward. I was in Ward 3 this year, they got this weekend. Every ward in this city has significant poverty. Right. So yes, we do believe in equity, and we do believe every ward will be touched. But what we're not going to do is spread this like peanut butter and not have an appropriate impact. I will tell you that we are going to also work closely with the administration to make sure that we work with the departments to understand the data and where we need to make the deep dive on the data. So that's what we really want to try to do. And yes, whatever we put forth in the legislation, I would like, if me and the mayor and his team and the administration can agree upon this week, I would like to prepare this legislation for July the 13th, at least for introduction, so that we can go through the process of trying to get it passed and get it done. But everything that they will present will have a complete backdrop on how it will be implemented.
But Mr. Chairman, I'm not asking you to spread like peanut butter or jam or jelly. I'm asking you, like with the lead safe money, where North Glenville couldn't get any. Okay. So I need to make sure that there is equity.
I got you.
Okay. We got you. So because I'm very passionate about that. I'm serious about heart.
And I will, before I go to, if you, Councilman Conlon asked for a point, if you allow Councilman, but before Councilman Conlon's point, let me state this. When you do a grant from HUD, you get the grant based on the SPA, the statistical planning area that you are going to try to serve. The reason that North Glenville probably didn't get that $10 million is because that money was focused on a geographically targeted government area that that was disproportionately impacted. Now, that's a HUD thing. That's where you deal with the federal government, where they make you down to the T. They don't just give you money and say, "Oh, go do what you want to." They, this specific grant was the focus on certain statistical census tracts in the Glenville area. That's the reason why that money came up further. This money here is leveraged, if you can remember, Councilman McCormick and myself, because we passed that Let's Safe ordinance, we now have leveraged that money to $52 million from the Cleveland Clinic, and now there's approximately $115 million in that account, and that money can be used for anybody across the city that can be affected by lead. So we have tried to be flexible on all of this.
Okay, I like that word, flexible, okay? Flexible and equity. Write those words down, flexible and equity. So we're gonna make sure out there's some equity and there's flexibility as it pertains and a tranche of infectious disease they got, a tranche, and to make sure that this money is spent adequately. And then, Mr. Chairman, the other thing I would add to this, with regard to home repair programs and all this stuff, if we're gonna partner with the banks and financial institutions, we gotta make sure we're partnering with institutions that are lending money in the city and are pro-Cleveland. I had an experience myself 2 weeks ago where I inquired about a mortgage loan for a home on my street through, I'm gonna be able to tell it right here, through Key Bank. They wouldn't give me the time of day. And I have excellent credit because they said, they told me they frown upon making loans under $100,000 in the city of Cleveland. That's just what they told me. And said I should go see Rocket Mortgage. I said, what? I didn't tell them I was a councilman. I was calling as a citizen to inquire about getting a mortgage loan, and even I have an account there. That's even better yet. Wouldn't give me the time of day. And so we, not only this council, but this administration, we have Community Reinvestment Act requirements. We've got to start holding these institutions accountable. When I look at what's happening in the city, and I can only speak to the east side, what I hear from people who can't get loans, can't get home rehab loans, can't get business loans, that's man-made. That's no coincidence. That's being done deliberately to deny people the access. And I can now attest to it firsthand experience through Key Bank. Through Key Bank. And so there's got to be connectivity. When we're going to fund a home repair program, if we're going to fund new construction, gap financing, we have to do it with institutions that are investing in our city neighborhood. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
On that point, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman, are you finished with your comments?
Yes, I am.
Okay, now Councilman Jones, a brief point before I move to Councilman.
Mr. Chairman, what he's saying is really critical, and I don't think that as a council we have fundamentally really dealt with the issue of redlining and the community of the city of Cleveland. I testified here at this table on several occasions talking about the failure of being able to get loans for both business usage in addition to being able to get loans for expanding my property. Mr. Mike Kalinzik just stated here, and another colleague, a member of this body, that he also has been unable to give funds for his property. This is not only just an issue for us as city elected officials, but this is an issue for our residents too, who have not been able, unfortunately, Mr. President, to get funds to do small home improvements. In addition to getting loans for small businesses, this is what is killing the city of Cleveland. It is one of the reasons why on the east side of the city of Cleveland, you see so much despair and you see it looking like a ghost town because people are not getting the services and the financial institutions, Mr. President, are discriminating against the citizens of the city.
Gotcha.
And Mr. President, I have asked the council in years past to set up a special committee and to sit down with the financial institutions to talk about how we can do this very thing. When you talk about equity and you talk about leverage of ARPA funds, we need to fundamentally sit down and talk about how we can use some of these funds so that we can help our citizens to be able to get some of the financing, capable.
I gotta work around you. I want to commit this to you. This is what I want to do because you've been bringing this up and you bring this up every meeting, and I hear you. You're right. What I will commit to do is we have a CRA director. Actually, she just left, but we have Director Wackers and Melissa Hernandez. What I will do is I will work with Councilman Harrison. There is a committee that looks specifically at CRA agreements. I would work with Councilman Harrison to try to set up some time where we can do a deep dive into our CRA agreements and how they are being effective in the city of Cleveland, and really work on if we need to bring those banks in and how we can do that. So we will have time that we will work through that, because I hear your frustration about that, and you're right. I just want to do for time's sake, because I know that I have to go, I may have to turn this over, but I want to make sure that I give every council member an opportunity to give some input. But I will commit to working with you to have a discussion on that. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilwoman House, then Councilwoman Starr, and then we're going to end up with Councilman Harrison. Oh, Snipes is on here too. And I apologize, I may have to move. Before Councilman House goes, if I have to go to this next meeting that I have to go to, and I do have to leave, what I would like to do is, it's not going to be by vote, okay? We're not going to do it by vote. What I would like to do is, if you have follow-up, then I want you to make sure you talk with Ann and Jessica. I will reconvene and have a discussion with them as far as if there are any adjustments or anything else that you guys are requesting. But I would, without objection, how about that? Without objection, I would at least like to have a discussion with this document as a working document with the administration, and as we, as the administration and us finalize the first batch. How about that, Council? First batch of dollars. All right, and then that way we'll hear back from the administration. Mayor Bibb and his team may have some ideas, and then I'll bring the final document back for council in legislative form and talk with Chairman Harrison about how we move forward, because technically all this is going through this. Okay, that sounds fair. All right, Councilwoman House.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So in looking at this, there were, so just a couple of things of how I look at these ARPA funds. One is, what is the actual true return on investment that we're going to get? And I think we really need to understand that I am a bit hesitant to say that we should fund a program without it having a long-term strategy.
Can I have a point on that? Because that's a very important point. Joe and team and Jessica, Councilwoman House's point, I think every one of these, we should actually show that. For example, the way we could do it is the 17 million we did with lead, show what the return of our investment was, number one, and then number two, make sure that the outcomes that she's talking about, who would it be serving, how many people would it be serving, because she brings a good point that we're not just giving open dollars. Councilwoman, would you add anything to that, or how would we track that?
Yeah, I can give some, just thoughts. This is a couple of different ways, but you just have to have a return on investment of one-time funding. The other thing that I would say in this is I always go back to, just from a city understanding, what should we be doing? And I think just getting a better understanding, what should the city of Cleveland be doing? Again, I've always said, just coming in my first 6 months, the city of Cleveland is doing way too much. We're doing way too much, and we don't do things with excellence. And that's just my opinion. We can go argue back and forth, because I do think we are spread way too thin, trying to do everything for everybody, and the city is just not designed to do that. And so taking that mindset of looking at, well, what should the city of Cleveland really be doing? Really focusing our investments in the things that we should be doing, so that we can begin to develop a level of excellence and begin to partner with people to do things. So as Councilman Pulisic indicated about these banks, ideas, I was just happy to be in an event with the chief, what's his name, Chris Gorman, he back. about two, and I didn't know it was, but we had a real interesting conversation, and we were supposed to be following back up. But, we gotta be able to find, like, with this money, the leveraging, like, there's no reason why the city of Cleveland should not have, with our private partners, a $300 million for like home renovation agreement. Like that's the minimum, right? And I'm figuring out like how do we leverage the city of Cleveland's dollars to get to that point because of the level of devastation that we have. And then the other thing is I always think about innovation, right? We talk about how I just lost my train of thought. But get something. Okay, so no, the average cost of the home is like $250,000, $300,000, and that's not affordable. It's not sustainable for our people, right? So what are the new models? Me and Councilman Harsh had a conversation about, okay, well, what type of housing is available? We got prefab homes, right? Luther and Metropolitan Middle Street was thinking they have 3D homes now. Like, are there real opportunities to look at some of these more innovative technologies and things of that nature that can get, like, we need a $50,000 home that can be built in the city of Cleveland. I know people like, oh, that's not available. Yes, it is somewhere. So why can't we use something like that to really, then we can couple with the bank to say, hey, y'all come through, give this person that $50,000 loan because this is the product of availability. I just, again, I'm not knocking none of this stuff, but I just want us to use this opportunity. This is one-time money. We have to be very, very, this is the opportunity. If we try and fail, okay, you know what I'm saying? But like, let's put some things out here to at least try to be innovative, really looking at the devastation that this global pandemic has caused disproportionately to people. And then one thing, and then the other thing, that's my point. I'm just kind of going around because I know other people need to talk. And then around education, I just don't think, oh Jesus. Our education, like the whole educational system is just a whole thing. Like our kids are lost, and we, like, if we aren't thinking very differently about education, we're gonna be in a world of trouble. That's right. We are in a world of trouble, and we just have to have a much broader conversation with the school district and the state. I mean, to really start trying things in the city of Cleveland. And I'm talking about going to year-round schools, like changing the school day from 7:30 to 6:30. We have to do something drastically different, or our kids are going to be gone forever. Because the only thing that catches you back up when you lose time is time. We got to get more time. That's it. So that's my 2 cents. I'm going to continue to push that we work and be, but I'm okay. And I am one of the people, when it comes to safety, and I know a lot of people have been conditioned to think that police make you safe, and I will always say, by the time you call police, the problem's already happened. I'm going to continue to advocate for prevention, investment in people, so that they don't grab the gun. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Just a couple of things I want to make sure I underscore. The school district also has gotten a significant amount of ARPA dollars, and one of the things that I think would be great if I'll pivot this to Councilwoman Santana, your committee, but it'd be good to get an understanding from the school district what they've invested in, because a lot of times I think we duplicate and we're adding on or we're supplementing funding that they've already gotten money for. So it'd probably be good to really hear what they have on the table. And then number 2, one of the reasons that I have Habitat in there is because the best deal in the city of Cleveland is Habitat for Humanity. A lot of people don't care a lot of times for those kind of products, but I can tell you that I have several single mothers raising children and brand new Habitat homes that are built all throughout the community. And I know that they have several other targeted areas that they're focused on, and they do have a very good product that they can leverage that can create more. And then when you look at some of our other partners already, we know, and I know we can't, that there has to be an RFP turnout, but we do have several community partners that are supposed to be providing affordable. And I think what we have to do is a better job challenging them on what is real affordable housing, because that's the goalpost that I think nobody really gets is what is really affordable housing. So I think we have an opportunity through this process to really define that and really create some products that can help that way. All right, I'm gonna go to Councilman Starr, then Councilman Hairston, then Councilman Slide. And I promise I really meant for this to be a talk.
Chair, I'm not gonna leave out of that. Some of the stuff that I spoke on, me and Councilwoman Cox agree on as in regards to education and safety. But something I wanted to ask, Chair, to you or anyone at the table. I know we put rental assistance for $5 million. I'm trying to get a clue of the thought of from everyone else what that looks like. Because I know people out there that want to do some stuff, and I'm trying to figure out, are we trying to do the same thing that we possibly already put money towards with another organization, or is this something different?
I'm gonna let the policy team answer that, but it's my understanding that we use the estimate based on what we've given to some of those other organizations. What I can't commit to and can't say is that we're going to go to that same group or same organization, because we might need to diversify. That's a conversation that we'll have with the administration to figure out if it may be other organizations, because I kind of think that we got 1 or 2 organizations that's over capacity, and we really need to figure out if there's other people that can help us do that.
All right, I agree, because with that over capacity, I think Ward 5 is discriminating against. And I done had conversations with these organizations, and it seems as if they believe only services needed in Ward 5 is heat and bid. And I think that's mistakenly wrong. And if we're allocating funds to these different organizations, I'm big on the actual data and oversight to make sure that they're actually doing the work. I will also bring up a point that $3 million for workforce programming is far too low as far as funding when you think about the needs in the city of Cleveland. We have a lot of different job openings in the city, but not that many people are applying because they don't have the skill set or they're shying away from that. So coming out of the pandemic, it showed us that obviously certain jobs can be done at home, but it also enlightened us how far we are behind on just skill sets for people to be able to have development to work in this field. So I think we need to possibly explore ways to increase the workforce programming from $3 million, probably $5 to $6 million, something like that, because people need to be able to have the skills. And it goes back into what Councilwoman House was mentioning. Our kids are lost. When you look at the fact that they build in prisons based on the 3rd grade reading scores. So when you look up and see a kid, and 30% of our children are moving on to the 4th grade, and they're not at the level that it needs to be as far as their reading scores are failing, they never catch up at that time. So I'm big on the component of that workforce education, and then also after school services programs to possibly play a role in that, because it can't be all the school and it can't just be the parents' part as well. It has to be a combination of leaders working together to solve this problem, and even if it's continuing education. And one last point that I'll make, Chair, and I'll yield, would be, when you go to some of the suburbs, one thing I notice is, we have too many school buildings, if you ask me. When you go to certain neighborhoods in certain other cities, they have their K through 5 elementary school almost, K through 5, 6 through 8 middle school, and then they have high school all on the same campus. So that problem or that issue that is everyone says, well, we got to more K through 8 because we want to make sure to go to the younger students. We can still do that if we were strategic on our approach, meaning we kept everyone on that campus, so therefore we can get the service. But I am against having 14-year-olds, 13, 14-year-olds in the same building with a 6-year-old, because the way you teach and educate a middle schooler is different. And when that middle school kid gets in there, you need to put a little bit more loving, and you can't do the same things when the little one hears them out. We all been in middle school when you first think you can say a profane language or something. It happens, and it's part of the culture. But in order for us to change that, we got to be more strategic. And our yield, we just need to make sure we increase workforce programming, look towards education opportunities and after-school program services to curb some of the issues, and if we're going to spend ARPA dollars, I think that could be some of the focuses as well.
Thank you, Councilman. Great points. A couple of things that I do want to make sure that I want us to think about. I agree that workforce that we need to probably increase that. My question is, and what I really would like us to look at is possibly if there's something remaining to fund part now and part next year. So maybe if we did a certain part now and then come back at it next year, so then that way we could, at least have a 2-year record of it and really, kind of have a tiered approach to it. Because I also want us to remember that we do have this proposal on the table for the opportunity CLE, which is to Councilman House's point. If it's a $7.5 million investment, it can leverage up to about $50 million more. And that may be broken up into two. So just to keep that in mind that just because we don't put the full amount in this time, we may be able to break it up. Because originally I was going to break up the lead safe ordinance and do 8.5 this year and 8.5 next year, and we decided not to do that because it was cleaner and more legislatively and legally sound to do it all in one tranche.
And just because you mentioned this, Chair, for the last say, when are we going to get some data for the stuff that they are doing?
They're going to be, I've had a conversation with them over the weekend, we are revamping that whole engagement, and I am going to put one of the most valuable people on your committee will be all up in their stuff.
I would love to.
Rebecca Mars.
Oh, I got time.
Everybody,
I got time.
they can wait to get a hold of her.
Because I asked that because, it was great the amount of funding that we allocated to the program, but when you did canvas and you went out now, as a member of council, we're trying to get people homes that safe, but then you look up and see that they got a hole in their floor, roof missing, windows missing, and it's like, I got some real issues on top of the lead in my house. So just wondering how many ways we can all work together.
Well, you're right about that. That was the argument when we first started the conversation, is how are we going to a home? And they were asking to fix the lead, and they have all 8 domains and say safe, clean housing is affected. And that's something that I think the lead safety advisory group and others can really help us with. So you're welcome to be a part of that. Even though that I'm going to help, I put Councilwoman Mora in the mix with that.
Councilwoman, you got it?
Council President.
Yes. On that point, Councilwoman House.
Yes, on the workforce portion, I would say invest in workforce. I know this county and I know the city contributes to this workforce investment board and and I believe it's like $20 million. And I guess most people probably don't even know it exists. So I think maybe this may be an opportunity to circle back to that body to see what they are doing and how our dollars being leveraged before we put anything into anything else. And there are several workforce initiatives that are going around, and maybe this is an opportunity to bring people together so that we can get the bang for our dollar. And again, this is one-time funding, so we already have some systems in place. So that's just my suggestion.
Totally agree. And once again, the administration is here, and I'm pretty sure they're probably taking copious notes on this as well. One last thing, to Councilman Starr's point, this is kind of a sticking point, and sometimes my county colleagues get a little bit tiff with me when I say this, but the city's job is to focus on city services, city infrastructure, and city stuff, city services. The city has never gotten as many social service requests as we're getting now. So when you talk about after-school programs and a lot of those different things, some of us that's been around government for a while knows that the social service safety net that we pay for, that we get assessed for on a regular basis with the Health and Human Services tax, go to the county. And we need to really work with the county, and they got funding in order to do some things, and maybe they should focus on the after-school programming and the social service needs, while we focus on the city services and infrastructure needs. I want to get us into a standpoint of working on practicality and not ideology. How do we focus on dealing with what's practical for the city and city services, and not a bunch of, let's put a bunch of social programs, because that's what the county is really supposed to be funded for. And we gotta start, putting that out there too. Okay?
Yep. So with that being said, we're gonna have a conversation with our colleagues at
We
the
gonna
conference.
do that too.
Okay.
You in charge of reminding me on that.
Oh, no, you're right. I got that. Okay, so like, so you can take.
We got that list. All right, I'm gonna go to Councilman Harrison and then Councilman Slight, and I'm gonna ask if my colleague Carrie McCormick can take over the meeting. But once again, without objection, if I don't hear an overwhelming cavalcade, I know that I got to hear from my councilman, my good friend, council colleague Joe Jones, about some suggestions that he has. But if I, without objection, my next step is to begin having a conversation with the administration and Chief Davey, who I want to thank for being so gracious for being here and hearing this conversation. I do want to do this, if I could, Councilman Harrison and Councilman Slight, can I hear from Chief Davey for a brief moment? Just if he would just like to comment, or if he has anything he would like to say about his process.
Hopefully someone gave him some lunch.
What's that? No, I'm staying strong.
Come on, just come up here
Sure.
and just say hello. The newlywed happily married.
That's right.
Congratulations. Just tell us about your process, and then I got Councilman Harrison and Councilman Slight, but I did want to give you an opportunity just to address.
Sure. Thanks for having me and for the insights today. Got to take in some of the list of projects that this council has sort of compiled, and left me with a few questions, and questions I hope that we can grapple with collaboratively together. How can we impartially evaluate these funding requests? How do we ensure that the funding for these projects do not create unfunded mandates, projects and programs that are important now but may not have funding to continue for residents who rely on? How are we making sure that these projects have funding leverages so that we aren't spending too much of these scarce resources when maybe someone else is already willing or interested to help being a funding partner? And then, maybe most importantly, is what policy levers do we have to really think about that will allow these projects and these initiatives to have real teeth? And then, to many of your point, particularly Councilman House, what is the investigation, the interrogation, and the evaluation of not just these projects and these programs, but of the institutions who are going to carry them out? What does that look like? And so, that's the work that this administration hopes that we can do collaboratively. Two pieces on the process. We have created a strategic template that we've given to the members of the administration who have been assigned to each of the individual 10 priority areas that the mayor put out. They're going to complete that template and share it with all council, so we all know what that'll look like on the back end when it's done. And then a short evaluation guide, 10 questions that we think get to the core of many of the issues that we're concerned about. Is there strategic alignment? Are there measurable outcomes and SMART goals and metrics? Is racial inclusion a part of the project that is being presented? What does community impact mean, and how many residents are affected and where? Does this act as a differentiator for the city of Cleveland? Is this project or program different than something that already exists, or attracts new people to the city of Cleveland because it's important and beneficial? Is there financial leverage? Is there longevity? And is there environmental sustainability? So we'll be evaluating every project that the mayor advances through this lens. I invite you to use the evaluation guide as well. We would love to share evaluation guides to think about how we come to agreement. And then, of course, we want to think about this in quarterly legislative dockets. When we sort of decided that we would present to you in a quarterly way so that you weren't looking at a slew of projects, but would give you enough time and space to consider them thoughtfully legislatively. So that's a quick process. Other than that.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate that feedback. If you'd like to sit at the table, you're welcome to hang out right here.
I have to jump, but I do have staff still taking notes.
All right.
Thanks for that.
Wonderful. Okay, Council President wants to go with Councilman Slight. Because Councilman Harrison is a ring gun down there, so he wants to finish it off. So
I'm gonna drag it out. I'm gonna drag it out. Stay here all day long. I'll try to be as quick as I can. Just a couple reactions to the chart that's up on the screen. One, for the Birthing Beautiful Communities, Mr. Chair, I think it might be wise for us, given last Friday, to think about that figure and what that money would go towards. So Birthing Beautiful Communities, I met with Jasmine Long a couple weeks ago, a great organization, does a whole lot to reduce infant mortality, support mothers, especially mothers of color, but given what's coming out of the federal government, I am worried that there's going to be too many women in Cleveland who are being put in very dangerous health situations, and what organizations are going to have to be stepping in to fill that gap. Really worried about it. So that's, I know that's not going to end it there because it's so big, but I think that we should be generally aware of it and thinking of that. Also with the just the comments about the banks, it's sort of been an observation of mine that maybe too often we are expecting people to come to us with a solution. And I think that we need to be strategic and meaningful about taking what specifically we need for our residents and giving that to the banks, giving that to other financial institutions, and kind of being the conductor of the orchestra and giving them something to react to. I've been told anecdotally by many, many people that the financial institutions tend to be receptive when they are brought a specific idea, but when you are just walking into a big branch and that bank has metrics put in by corporate, and that's where things start to fall apart. And just to be blunt, the mission of all of these corporations, they're going to be these great altruistic things, but the truth is that they exist for their shareholders and pay dividends. And I'm not knocking that, I'm just stating that that's the case. So they're not designed to be our Messiah. So we need to stop thinking that they're going to become our Messiah one day. We need to think about how we lead the conversation, how we bring in credit unions, other institutions. I've been meeting with Bank on Cleveland, but there's a lot of work to do, but I think we have to be intentional about it and kind of set the standards, because they're not going to bring it to us. That's just not what they're designed to do. That's not what they're built for. And again, what they're built for has a place. It's just not necessarily what we need in this moment. And I think too often when people bring us ideas, they tend to be very often well-intentioned people who choose not to live in the city of Cleveland, and despite being well-intentioned, sometimes it can be kind of patronizing or just not exactly what we need in our communities. So let's partner together on that. But the last thing, Mr. Chair, and this is related really to the to-be-determined amount for Adams Board of Mental Health. There's a growing, a pretty strong advocacy group in town that is interested in what's called a co-response model for mental health. So this is the idea that a team of a police officer, a paramedic, and a social worker would work collaboratively to go to mental health crisis interventions and be able to be more strategic and offer the resources that person needs in the moment. Right now, we're doing a lot of mental health response through public safety. People are doing the best that they can, but when we have a crisis intervention team in the police, that they're not 24 hours a day, they're really open during daylight hours. If someone is having an anecdote about multiple ambulances at one point on public square helping multiple individuals going through a mental health crisis, sending a paramedic unit that is designed to take emergent people to the hospital as quickly as possible is not a cost-effective solution for what that person might need right now. But this idea of having a team, a social worker who is experienced in dealing with mental health, a police officer who's able to connect to legal resources and protect the scene as necessary, and a paramedic who's able to bestow medical treatment, all working together collaboratively. I think that and even just having a van that they could say, we're willing to drive you to an appointment or drive you home or help you get the service you really need, but knowing that it's different than what just a regular 911 call would generate. So I'm rambling on, but In speaking with some leaders in this field, $2 million a year would fund essentially 12 workers. It would be 3 of each of those types, and that would allow for 24/7 coverage. And I think that that's something that we should be looking at with ARPA funds and begin those discussions. I understand there's a reluctance to putting these funds towards staffing, worry about the longevity of it, but I'll just point out that we're already doing this work. We can just be doing it more efficiently. I think that this gives us an opportunity to pilot this model, which has been incredibly successful across the country, and allow it to be absorbed back into the general fund budget at a certain point, but it would go a long way in addressing the mental health needs of many of our residents, many people that are just coming through Cleveland that have been exacerbated by COVID, which are very often concentrated into the geography of the city of Cleveland as we monitor the center. So I have some information about it. I'll pass this around to everybody, but I think that it would be a very impactful way to address this citywide and create a system that can endure, knowing that these funds will go away in a couple of years. So I'll pass this around. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. I think it's something I'm really passionate about.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate those comments. Councilman Starr, did you want to comment for Councilman Harrison?
No, I'm good.
Alrighty, take us home, Councilman Hairston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to share a few points. I know, actually, Councilman Woodley and I had a meeting with CMSD or a couple a month and a half ago, and ARPA money came up in discussion. I believe that CMSD's $100 are restricted. There's a restriction on the use of those dollars, so that's something we should we had a discussion with CMSD to ask that question. Also, I know that United Way, Right to Council, I think all three should be taken off the list. The United Way, Right to Council should stay funded as is, and we continue to fund it in the manner we already do. We already fund both of those. Rental assistance, I actually had a meeting with CHA this morning, and there's a lot of money still left to be put out on the streets. And there may be more coming, is what I'm understanding as well. And not to mention the county also has dollars that they have given to CHA and other partners as well. And from my understanding that now the county money is also going to be not only for suburban communities, but the city of Cleveland as well. So there is a ton of money out there for rental assistance. In fact, they indicated to me that applications have slowed down. Coming into that department, or not department, to that organization. And I spoke with a few other organizations, so their applications have slowed down as well regarding rental assistance. So I think that is a number that we can delete from this budget, and I'll have a conversation with the president about that. And also, Right to Council, Right to Council does a lot of great things in our community. And yes, absolutely want to still support that program, but I think the way we are funding it, and through the means that we're funding it, is sufficient. And United Way, the same. 2 other points before we get out of here. I think it's important, as we heard from our colleagues, that we connect and work with our colleagues at the county. Because the county, just like they have ARPA dollars, the county has them as well. And so they are going through a process, the individual council people and the executive, looking at ideas that have been presented to them, proposals that have been submitted, applications that have been submitted to them, that we should really work with them to see what has been submitted to them, what do they intend to fund. Is there things that we can leverage our dollars with the county dollars to have a greater impact, or maybe things that they are funding? I'm sure briefly is something that they will be investing heavily in. And so that's just one example that, as we move on through this process, I think it would be good for us to have a discussion. In fact, I already talked to council staff over there about, the idea, and they were open to collaborating with the city council in terms of information sharing, kind of proposals they receive, what we receive, what they're thinking about funding versus what we're thinking about. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, this $7.5 million Cleveland Development Advisors. I get it. I understand what the group is looking to do and how they intend to leverage the money. But we need to pull back those layers and dig deeper into what they are looking to do. And I know that it's neighborhood specific in what they're looking to do. My issue is that there should be no neighborhood left behind, right? And that we need to have a plan for all of the neighborhoods
and how we plan to move forward to address the needs and not single out one person for whatever reason. However, we really need to dig into that request a little bit deeper because what our priorities may be on this body and the mayor's office may not be the same priorities as this fund that we are looking to pay into, or invest into, better term than pay, but invest into. So I just ask that we look deeper into that, and I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that, and glad to hear all the really important feedback and get to know some of your committee because we'll be able to really, whatever this becomes, will become with your committee, so we'll be able to document this. All right, well, once again, I want to thank the City Council staff, research team for all the hard work that you put into this document. You guys did a lot of work, a lot of listening, a lot of, pulling all this information together, so we appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who hung out with us today for this long session, including documenters, whoever's here with them. Thank you, as always, for the good work that you do. This caucus, the Cleveland City Council is adjourned.